Hello, brave souls, and welcome back to my channel, where we explore the darkest corners of the unknown. Tonight, we're taking a journey into the eerie, chilling world of North Carolina's most haunted cemeteries. From the mist-covered tombstones to the whispers of restless spirits, this state is home to graves that hold secrets, tragedies, and stories that will make your skin crawl. North Carolina may be famous for its scenic landscapes, warm southern hospitality, and historic landmarks, but beneath the rolling hills and quiet towns lie cemeteries that are far from peaceful. These resting places are steeped in ghostly legends, mysterious apparitions, and unexplained occurrences that have haunted locals for generations. Whether it's a shadowy figure that disappears when approached, strange lights flickering among the headstones, or the sensation of being watched when no one else is around, the haunted cemeteries of North Carolina offer more than a glimpse into the past. They offer a chilling encounter with the unknown. Tonight, we'll explore 25 of the most haunted cemeteries in the state. We'll uncover the stories behind these ghostly sites, share eyewitness accounts, and maybe, just maybe, you'll feel a cold chill as if a spirit is watching from the shadows. So, turn off the lights, put on your headphones, and prepare for a journey that will haunt your dreams. Let's step into the graveyard of the unknown. Beneath the moss-draped oaks and windswept branches of Beaufort, North Carolina, lies one of the oldest and most mysterious cemeteries in the state. The Old Burying Ground. Established in the 1700s, this sacred ground has witnessed over 2 centuries of life, death, and secrets. Today, its weathered tombstones lean at odd angles, and iron gates creak as the wind whispers through the quiet streets of the historic town. But for those who dare to enter after dark, the Old Burying Ground is anything but silent. The air feels different the moment you step inside. Visitors describe a heavy stillness, as if the cemetery is holding its breath. The smell of damp earth mixes with the faint aroma of salt from the nearby harbor. Crickets sing their mournful tune, and in the distance, you can hear the rhythmic crash of waves. But sometimes, in that uneasy silence, there are other sounds that don't belong. For centuries, locals have spoken of ghostly figures drifting through the rows of ancient headstones. These spirits are said to belong to sailors, soldiers, and townsfolk who met tragic fates. Some appear as fleeting shadows, darting between trees. Others linger long enough to send a chill crawling down your spine. Those who have seen them describe translucent shapes, pale and wavering, like mist caught in the moonlight. They seem to glide rather than walk, their faces obscured, their movements unnaturally smooth. The most unsettling reports are not just sightings, but whispers. Countless visitors claim they've heard voices when no one else was near, soft, almost melodic murmurs that seem to float through the air. Some say the voices call their names. Others hear fragments of sentences, spoken in tones that are both sorrowful and commanding. And then there are those who swear the whispers come from the ground itself, rising up from beneath the graves as if the dead are trying to speak. One of the most enduring legends tied to the Old Burying Ground is that of the Revolutionary War soldiers. During the late 1700s, Beaufort was no stranger to violence. Battles raged along the coast, and many men never made it home. They were buried here, in shallow graves marked by crude stones and weathered crosses. Today, locals insist these soldiers are not at rest. When the sun dips below the horizon and twilight drapes its purple veil across the town, some claim to hear the distant echo of marching boots. The sound begins faintly, like a drumbeat far away, then grows louder, as if an invisible regiment is crossing the earth. Witnesses describe the rhythmic crunch of footsteps, the metallic clink of muskets, and the low murmur of men giving orders, though when you turn toward the sound, there's nothing there but rows of silent graves. The phenomenon isn't limited to sound. There are stories of light small, glowing orbs that float above the headstones. They move slowly at first, bobbing gently in the air, then dart away with unnatural speed. These lights appear most often near the graves of sailors and soldiers. Paranormal investigators have tried to capture them, but the orbs vanish the moment cameras are raised. Some skeptics chalk them up to swamp gas or reflections from nearby water. but those who have seen them swear there's something intelligent about their movement, something almost aware. Perhaps the most famous grave in the old burying ground belongs to the little girl in the rum barrel. She was a child who died at sea during a voyage from England. Her grieving father, unwilling to bury her in foreign soil, placed her small body in a rum barrel to preserve it until the ship returned to Beaufort. Today, visitors leave toys and trinkets on her grave, hoping to comfort her spirit, but many say her presence lingers. Some claim to have seen a small figure in a white dress flitting between the trees. Others report the faint sound of a child's laughter echoing softly in the night air. If you listen closely, they say, you might hear the tap of tiny footsteps across the gravel path, footsteps that stop the moment you turn to look. The energy of this cemetery is palpable. People who walk through its gates describe sudden temperature drops, waves of dizziness, and an overwhelming sense of being watched. Even in broad daylight, shadows seem to move where they shouldn't, and the air hums with a strange electricity. Ghost tours pass through here often, their guides recounting the chilling history of the graves. Yet even those who make a living from the dead admit there are moments when the old burying ground feels alive. Some say the spirits here are restless because of how they died violently, far from home, or too young to understand their fate. Others believe the land itself holds the echoes of centuries past, imprinted with the grief, fear, and longing of those who once walked its soil. Whatever the reason, the old burying ground has earned its reputation as one of the most haunted places in North Carolina. For every person who visits and leaves unscathed, there is another who swears they took something with them, a chill that never fades, a whisper that lingers in their ears long after they've gone. If you ever find yourself in Beaufort, you may feel tempted to visit this historic cemetery. Go during the day, if you must. Admire the weathered stones, the ancient trees, and the history etched into every name. But if you choose to go at night, remember this. The dead here do not sleep. They march, they whisper, and they watch. And once you've stepped inside the old burying ground, you might never truly walk away. Hidden among the quiet hills of Morganton, North Carolina, lies a place where the earth seems to breathe with secrets. Brown Mountain Cemetery. To most, Brown Mountain is famous for its mysterious lights, glowing orbs that hover and dance in the night sky, baffling scientists and locals for generations. But deep in the shadows of this ancient land, another legend whispers through the dark. It belongs to the cemetery that bears the mountain's name, a burial ground steeped in sorrow and haunted by restless spirits. Brown Mountain Cemetery is small, unassuming, and easy to miss if you're not looking for it. Surrounded by towering trees and a tangle of wild undergrowth, its weathered headstones lean at odd angles, their inscriptions fading from centuries of wind and rain. Time has worn the names from some markers entirely, leaving behind only silent slabs of stone jutting from the earth like crooked teeth. During the day, it is eerily quiet, save for the rustle of leaves and the distant call of birds. But when darkness falls and the wind sighs through the pines, the cemetery comes alive with things unseen. Those who have wandered the grounds at night speak of a feeling that defies explanation, a weight in the air, heavy and oppressive, as if the trees themselves are holding their breath. Visitors report sudden chills, the hair on their necks prickling without warning. And then there are the sounds. Soft, deliberate footsteps crunching through the leaves, though no living soul is near. The sound moves closer, then stops abruptly, leaving only the pounding of your heart and the question burning in your mind. Who or what was there? Shadow figures are often seen gliding between the tombstones, their movements swift and unnerving. They appear out of the corner of your eye, tall and thin, blacker than the night around them. Turn your head, and they vanish without a trace, melting into the darkness as if they were never there at all. Some witnesses claim these shadows linger near a particular grave, a lonely stone worn smooth by time, the final resting place of a woman whose story has haunted Morganton for over a century. Her name was Margaret, though locals know her simply as the Bride of Brown Mountain. She was a young woman in love, engaged to a soldier, who fought bravely in a distant war. They had promised each other forever, but forever never came. The man she loved never returned. Some say he was killed in battle. Others whisper he deserted her, vanishing into the world without a word. Heartbroken, Margaret walked to the cemetery every day, waiting by the graveyard gates for her beloved to come home. Seasons passed, and her hope withered like the flowers she placed on the graves. One bitter winter's night, they found her body near the entrance, frozen in the snow, her eyes open and fixed on the road as if still watching for him. They buried her in Brown Mountain Cemetery, among the stones she had tended for so long. But death did not end her vigil. To this day, locals claim her spirit wanders the grounds, searching endlessly for the man who never returned. She is seen most often on foggy nights, drifting between the graves in a white gown that glows faintly in the moonlight. Her head is bowed, her dark hair veiling her face, and in her hands she clutches a wilted bouquet of phantom flowers. Some say if you call out to her, she will lift her face and look at you, and in that moment, you will understand her sorrow so deeply that it will follow you for the rest of your life. The most chilling stories come from those who claim to have heard her voice. It begins as a whisper, soft and pleading, carried on the wind. "Have you seen him?" she asks, over and over, her words breaking with despair. Sometimes the whispers turn to sobs, echoing across the cemetery until the night itself seems to weep. There are even tales of drivers passing by the old road who see her standing near the gate, her pale form shimmering like mist. They slow down, thinking she's a lost travel, only to watch her vanish into the darkness before their eyes. But Margaret is not alone in this haunted place. Paranormal investigators have recorded strange activity throughout the cemetery. Spikes on EMF meters, sudden drops in temperature, and disembodied voices captured on tape. One chilling EVP replayed a woman's voice, low and mournful, saying, "I'm still waiting." Visitors have reported being touched by unseen hands, their clothes tugged as if by a desperate grip. And then there are the lights, the same strange orbs that dance along Brown Mountain ridges, sometimes drift among the graves, glowing faintly like lanterns carried by invisible mourners. Some believe these spirits are tied to the tragedies of the past, unable to find peace. Others think the land itself, with its long history of mystery and sorrow, holds them fast, trapping their echoes in an endless loop of longing and despair. Whatever the cause, one thing is certain: the dead do not sleep easily here. If you find yourself near Brown Mountain after dark, you may feel tempted to visit the old cemetery and see if the stories are true. But beware. Those who come looking for ghosts often find more than they bargained for. A brush of cold air against your neck, footsteps in the leaves behind you, a shadow flickering where no shadow should be, and if you hear a voice asking if you've seen him, you'll know Margaret has found you. And she won't stop searching, not even when you leave. In the heart of Charlotte, among the modern skyline and bustling streets, lies a place where time seems to stand still. Elmwood Cemetery is a sprawling expanse of green that stretches across 70 acres. A historic burial ground where the city's past rests beneath moss-covered stones and towering oaks. By day, it is a peaceful park-like setting, with winding paths and stately monuments honoring some of the most prominent figures in North Carolina's history. But when the sun dips below the horizon and darkness cloaks the land, Elmwood becomes something else entirely, a place of whispers, shadows, and things that vanish when you look too closely. The stories surrounding Elmwood Cemetery have circulated for generations. They speak of strange lights drifting between the graves, the rustle of footsteps on empty paths, and a figure so unsettling that those who see him never forget. It begins like this. You're walking along one of the old paths, your shoes crunching softly against gravel. The air feels heavier than it should, the night quieter than you expected. Then, out of the corner of your eye, you notice movement, a tall man standing perfectly still among the stones. He is dressed in black, from head to toe, his long coat swaying gently, as if in a breeze you cannot feel. His hat casts a shadow over his face, and though you cannot make out his features, you know his eyes are on you. Most people say the man doesn't move at first. He just stands there, silent and watching, as though waiting for something or someone. Then, when you gather the courage to take a step closer, he turns away. His figure glides effortlessly down the path, not walking so much as floating, and if you try to follow, you will never catch him. The faster you move, the farther away he seems. And then, without warning, he's gone. Not down a side path, not hidden behind a tree. Just gone, as if the night swallowed him whole. Witnesses describe this figure in the same chilling detail every time. Unusually tall, perhaps 6.5 feet, dressed in an old-fashioned black coat that brushes the ground, and a wide-brimmed hat that hides his face. Some call him the Watcher. Others believe he's a remnant of Charlotte's Victorian past, a man who cannot leave the city even in death. Paranormal researchers who have visited Elmwood claim the energy spikes near the oldest sections of the cemetery, where elaborate monuments and angel statues loom like sentinels in the dark. It is here, among these ornate markers, that the Watcher is most often seen. But the man in black is not the only ghostly presence in Elmwood. There are whispers of voices that drift through the night air, carrying fragments of conversations long past. People have reported hearing their names called softly, only to turn and find themselves alone. Cold spots appear without warning, chilling the skin even in the heat of summer. Some visitors claim to feel invisible eyes following them, a weight pressing on their shoulders as they move through the winding paths. One of the eeriest encounters came from a local photographer who entered the cemetery after sunset to capture its Gothic beauty. He set up his tripod near a marble obelisk, framing the shot perfectly. As the shutter clicked, he felt a strange sensation, as if someone was standing directly behind him. The air grew cold, his breath turning visible in the humid summer night. Slowly, he turned and froze. There, just a few yards away, stood the man in black. The photographer described the figure as perfectly still, the coat rippling slightly, though there was no wind. The man tilted his head, almost curious, before gliding away between the stones. When the photographer checked his images later, the figure appeared faintly in the first shot, blurred and elongated, like a shadow stretched too far. In the next frame, he was gone. Some believe the Watcher is tied to the old traditions of grave guardians, spirits assigned to protect the resting places of the dead. Others think he may be the lingering soul of a grieving husband or father, unable to move on from the loved ones buried here. Whatever the truth, his presence casts a long shadow over Elmwood, a reminder that history never truly sleeps. The cemetery itself adds to the unease. Elmwood is divided into sections, each representing different eras of Charlotte's past Confederate soldiers, prominent families, and countless unnamed graves. The monuments rise like silent sentries, their stone faces weathered and cracked, angels streaked with black from decades of rain. The paths seem endless, curling through darkness that grows deeper with every step. Even the streetlights beyond the gates feel distant here, their glow barely touching the heart of this shadowed world. In the heart of Raleigh lies a place where the weight of history presses down like a shadow. Oakwood Cemetery. Established in 1869, it was built as a resting place for Confederate soldiers, statesmen, and countless souls whose names have faded with time. During the day, it is a picturesque expanse of rolling hills and weathered stone, shaded by towering oaks that give the cemetery its name. But when night falls and moonlight spills across the graves, Oakwood becomes something else, a place where the living walk among whispers and the dead refuse to sleep. The first thing visitors notice after dark is the silence. It is not the peaceful hush of a quiet night, but something heavier, thick, oppressive, as if the very air resents your presence. That silence doesn't last long, though. Soon, faint sounds begin to creep in. A laugh, high, sweet, and distant, floats on the wind. Then another, softer this time, like the giggle of a child trying not to be caught. You turn, expecting to see someone, but the paths behind you are empty. Only the moon stares back, cold and unblinking. It is the children people speak of most often. Visitors tell of seeing them darting between the stones, their pale forms flickering like candlelight. They appear suddenly too, sometimes three dressed in clothes from another time, little white dresses, short trousers, bare feet pattering silently across the gravel paths. Their laughter rings bright and innocent, a sound that doesn't belong in a place like this. Some witnesses claim they've seen the children playing a game of tag, their arms outstretched as they chase one another through the rows of graves. But the moment you focus your eyes, the moment you try to see their faces, they vanish. 1 second there, frozen in the glow of moonlight. The next, nothing but shadows. No one knows who the children were. Some say they are the restless spirits of those lost to disease during the grim years of the 19th century, when illness claimed lives faster than they could be buried. Others whisper they are echoes of soldiers, children, little ones, who waited for fathers who never came home. Whatever the truth, their presence leaves more than footprints in the dew. Those who hear their laughter describe a sinking feeling that follows them for days, a sorrow so deep it clings to the soul like damp earth. And the children are not the only spirits said to linger here. Oakwood is steeped in the memory of war. More than 1,400 Confederate soldiers rest beneath its soil, their graves marked by simple white stones that gleam under the moon. People walking among these markers at twilight have reported the sound of boots on gravel, heavy and deliberate. Some hear the soft jingle of spurs, the metallic click of a sword brushing against a belt. Others feel a presence falling into step behind them, matching their pace until they freeze in fear. When they turn, the path is empty, but the air smells faintly of smoke and iron. There are accounts of shadowy figures standing in formation among the rows of graves. Silent sentinels with no faces, their bodies nothing more than darker patches of night. Sometimes these figures vanish as quickly as they appear. Other times, they linger just long enough for the temperature to plummet, for the breath to mist in front of your lips, even in the heat of summer. A few visitors claim they've locked eyes with a man in a tattered gray uniform, his gaze hollow and endless. He does not move, he does not speak, he only watches, as if weighing your soul against some forgotten measure. But the most unsettling stories come not from what people see, but from what they feel. Oakwood is a beautiful cemetery, but those who wander here at night often speak of an overwhelming sadness that crashes over them without warning. It begins as a heaviness in the chest, then deepens into something darker, grief that is not their own, sorrow that gnaws like teeth. Some drop to their knees among the graves, sobbing without knowing why, their tears mixing with the damp earth. When they leave, the feeling lingers for hours, sometimes days, as if the cemetery carries a piece of them away or leaves a piece of itself behind. Paranormal investigators who have dared to explore Oakwood report strange anomalies, cold spots that shift and follow, voices caught on recorders when no one spoke, faint music playing in the distance like a mournful lullaby. One recording chilled even the most skeptical among them. The sound of children singing a nursery rhyme, their voices thin and ghostly, the words almost impossible to make out. Almost. Locals warn against staying too long after dark. They say the spirits here are not malicious, but they are heavy with longing and loss, and they do not like to be forgotten. The gates of Oakwood close at sunset for a reason. Yet every year, thrill seekers and curious wanderers slip through the iron bars, drawn by the promise of something otherworldly. Some leave laughing, dismissing the stories as superstition. Others leave pale and trembling, their eyes darting to the shadows as if something followed them home. If you ever find yourself in Oakwood under the silver wash of moonlight, remember this: laughter is not always a sign of joy. Sometimes it is the echo of something broken, a sound that lures you deeper into the dark. And if you hear it high and sweet, like a child's voice, carried on the wind, do not follow. Do not look for the source. Because once you see them, once you meet their hollow eyes and feel their icy fingers brush your skin, you will understand why Oakwood Cemetery is more than a resting place. It is a memory that never dies. And if you're not careful, it might take you with it. Just beyond the whispering trees of Raleigh, hidden in a fold of land where time seems to slow, lies the historic Yates Mills Cemetery. To those who pass it in daylight, it appears unassuming rows of weathered stones, standing like sentinels. embraced by creeping ivy and framed by towering oaks. But as dusk settles and shadows lengthen, this small, forgotten graveyard becomes something far more unsettling. It is a place shrouded in mystery, where whispers ride the wind and unseen eyes watch from the darkness. For more than a century, stories have drifted like smoke from the Yates Mill area. Locals speak of glowing orbs hovering among the headstones, pulsing like heartbeats, before vanishing into the night. These orbs are said to be intelligent, almost curious, drifting close to those who dare step beyond the gates after sunset. Some claim the lights flicker in patterns, as though spelling out a warning only the dead can understand. Others swear the orbs are eyes watchful, unblinking, filled with something more than light. But the orbs are only the beginning. There are figures here too, tall and gaunt, their outlines barely visible against the deeper dark. They linger near the oldest graves, their forms wavering like heat ripples on summer asphalt. Witnesses describe them as shadows that do not belong, darker than the night, moving with a slow, deliberate grace. They never rush, they never run, they simply appear and watch. Those who have walked through Yates Mill Cemetery at night speak of voices soft, layered whispers that slide through the trees. At first, they are almost pleasant, like distant conversation, words you cannot quite make out. But listen too closely, and the tone changes. The voices grow urgent, desperate, as though pleading for something you cannot give. Some visitors say the whispers call their names, luring them deeper into the dark, while others report chilling phrases that leave no doubt of their intent. Leave this place before it takes you to. The strangest part of Yates Mill Cemetery's legend centers on one figure, the restless spirit of a miller, who met his death in a tragedy nearly forgotten by time. His name, lost to history, is spoken only in hushed tones, the miller of Yates. Long ago, when the mill still turned on the strength of rushing water, a man worked its great wheel during a violent storm. Lightning struck, shattering the old timbers and sending the wheel crashing into the churning water. The miller was caught in the gears, his body mangled beyond recognition. They buried what they could find in the quiet earth near the mill, and for years afterward, locals avoided the site after dark, whispering that his soul had not gone with him to the grave. To this day, visitors claim the miller still walks among the stones, his figure stooped, his clothes ragged and soaked as if fresh from the river. His face, they say, is the color of ash, his eyes pale as winter frost. Some describe hearing the grind of wood against metal, the groan of unseen wheels turning in the night, moments before the figure appears. And when he comes, there is no mistaking his intent. He wants you gone. People who have seen him tell of a rising dread of pressure that builds in the chest until breathing feels impossible. The air turns sharp and cold, biting the skin like a sudden frost. Then comes the sound, slow, deliberate footsteps crunching through the dead leaves, circling, drawing closer, and finally, the voice low, broken, yet unmistakable. Leave, now. One woman who visited the cemetery with friends described the moment she saw him. A shape stepping from the shadows, water dripping from his torn clothing, eyes glowing faintly in the darkness. He lifted an arm, pointing toward the gates with a finger that seemed more bone than flesh. They ran, stumbling over the uneven ground, hearts hammering as laughter dry. Hollow laughter followed them through the trees. When they looked back from the road, the figure was gone, but the sound lingered, echoing like the creak of an old mill wheel turning in the dark. Not all who visit Yates Mill Cemetery are chased away so violently. Some leave convinced the spirits here mean no harm, that they only want to be remembered. These visitors tell of fleeting touches on the arm, the brush of icy fingers against the back of the neck, and the faint scent of sawdust and river water carried on the breeze. They bring flowers, whisper prayers, and leave with the sense that someone or something was listening. But others are not so fortunate. There are stories of people who return home after visiting the cemetery, only to find strange things happening, wet footprints on their floors, the sound of grinding wheels in the dead of night, and whispers drifting from darkened corners of their rooms. Some speak of dreams filled with rushing water and splintered wood, of a voice rasping through the darkness. You should not have come. What draws the living to a place like this? Perhaps it is curiosity, or the thrill of fear, or the pull of something older, something that wants to be seen. Whatever the reason, those who step into Yates Mill Cemetery after sundown should tread carefully, watch the trees, listen for whispers. And if the air turns cold and heavy, if the shadows shift and the sound of grinding fills your ears, leave while you still can, because the miller is waiting, and he does not forgive. In the historic district of Winston-Salem lies a burial ground unlike any other place where time seems suspended in mist and silence. Old Salem Cemetery, resting among the cobblestone streets and preserved buildings of the Moravian settlement, holds more than the remains of the devout. It holds stories that stir the soul and chill the blood, tales of figures who never left the earth behind. By day, the cemetery is serene, its rows of flat gravestones neatly aligned, each identical to the next. This was the Moravian way: equality in death, just as in life. There are no towering monuments here, only markers that lie close to the soil, bearing names worn pale by centuries of rain. The air is still and reverent, heavy with history. But when dusk descends and the fog begins to curl low over the ground, something stirs among these modest stones, something that does not belong to the living. The first sign is often the cold. It creeps without warning, sliding across the skin like icy fingers, sharp enough to raise goosebumps even on a summer night. You can see your breath plume white in the air as the temperature plummets, though no wind blows. Then comes the sound of faint, distant hum that rides on the mist. It is music, thin and sweet, like a hymn sung by unseen voices. The notes drift through the night, rising and falling in a mournful cadence that seeps into your bones. The closer you draw to the source, the fainter it becomes, until it fades to nothing only, to swell again behind you. Witnesses speak of ghostly processions moving through the cemetery under the pale wash of moonlight. Figures in colonial attire, men in dark coats and breeches, women in long skirts and white caps glide silently along the paths in single file, their heads bowed in solemn prayer. They carry no candles, yet a soft glow clings to them, outlining their forms in a haze of silver light. Their faces are calm, almost serene, but their eyes are hollow shadows, empty as the graves beneath their feet. Some say the procession ends at a particular stone or weathered marker near the oldest part of the grounds. The figures kneel there for a moment, their lips moving in silent worship, before they dissolve into the mist and vanish. Those who have seen the procession and lived to tell the tale all agree on one thing: it is not for the living. The dead of old Salem march for reasons known only to them, bound to a ritual older than memory, and they do not welcome intruders. One man who followed them, drawn by curiosity or madness, claimed the air grew so heavy he could barely breathe, as though the fog itself was pressing into his lungs. Then, he said, the last figure in line turned its head, just a fraction, just enough for him to see the empty void where a face should have been. He ran, and though the procession never quickened its pace, he swears he heard their footsteps behind him all the way to the gate. The singing is another mystery. It comes most often on damp nights when the fog hangs low, curling like smoke around the stones. The melody is soft, sweet, and strangely familiar, as if echoing from a dream. Some have tried to record it, but the moment a device is raised, the sound ceases, leaving only silence and the hammering of the heart. A few visitors claim to have made out words, fragments of Moravian hymns sung long ago, prayers for peace from voices that never found it. The music brings no comfort. Instead, it fills the soul with a grief so deep it borders on despair, a yearning for something lost beyond reach. Cold spots are common here, but some chill to the very marrow. People describe pockets of air so frigid they burn the skin, lingering like invisible pools. Walk through one, and it feels as though hands of ice have seized you, holding you fast for a heartbeat too long. Some say these spots mark the presence of spirits, restless ones that stand and watch as you trespass through their sacred ground. There are other tales, darker ones whispered in hushed voices by those who believe too deeply. Stories of shadows that move against the light, slithering across the ground like living things, of names called, softly from the mist, in voices that sound like loved ones, long dead. Of footsteps pacing behind you, slow and measured, that stop the instant you turn. And of faces pale, hollow-eyed faces that bloom out of the fog, only to melt away before you can scream. Paranormal investigators who have dared to enter Old Salem after midnight report anomalies that defy explanation. Their cameras capture shapes that should not exist, blurs of white that stretch and twist into human forms before dissolving. EMF meters spike wildly in the oldest section, where the stones lie cracked and sunken. And on one chilling occasion, a recorder picked up a single, whispered word in German, bleiben, stay. No one knows why the spirits linger here. Some say they are bound by devotion, their hymns echoing across centuries as they wait for a dawn that will never come. Others believe something darker holds them tethered, something born of grief and ritual, feeding on the prayers that once sanctified this ground. Whatever the reason, one truth remains. The dead of Old Salem do not rest easily. If you find yourself in the historic district after dark, and the fog begins to roll in, tread carefully. Listen for the hymns, watch the mist for movement, and if you see a line of pale figures gliding between the stones, do not follow, do not speak. Turn away and leave while you still can, because once you join the procession, there is no coming back. There is a place in Durham where the wind speaks and the shadows move, with a place known as Maplewood Cemetery. By daylight, it feels almost tranquil, its wide paths winding through rows of granite and marble. The old trees spreading their limbs like watchful guardians. But when darkness drapes itself across the grounds, Maplewood becomes something far more sinister. It becomes a crossroads between worlds, where the living tread lightly and the dead do not sleep. For more than a century, stories have gathered here like fallen leaves, stories of voices in the night, lights where there should be none, and a figure that has haunted this cemetery for generations. She is called the Woman in White, and those who have seen her will never forget. They say she comes with the mist, gliding between the graves in silence. Her gown is pale as bone, trailing along the damp earth, glowing faintly in the moonlight. At first, she seems almost beautiful, with hair like cascading shadows and skin that gleams like porcelain. But look too closely, and beauty turns to horror. For her face, though perfect in form, is empty. Her eyes are pits of darkness, and her mouth, when it opens, releases a sound that is not a scream but something worse. A cry of endless longing, thin and sharp enough to split the night. No one knows who she was in life. Some say she was a young bride who died on her wedding day, her heart broken beyond repair. Others whisper she was a mother who lost her child and could not bear the grief. There are those who claim she was murdered, her body hidden beneath the roots of one of Maplewood's oldest trees, her soul cursed to wander forever in the shroud of her blood-stained dress. But whatever the truth, her spirit lingers in. She does not walk alone. Visitors to Maplewood after dark speak of lights that flicker like lantern flames among the headstones. They are small at first, darting and weaving in the gloom, but when approached, they vanish without a trace. Paranormal investigators call them orbs, manifestations of energy. But locals say something different. They are fragments of souls, torn and restless, drawn to the living like moths to a flame. Watch them too long, and you might feel a tugging, unseen pull at your chest, as though something deep within you is being lured away. The shadows here do not behave as they should. They bend and stretch against the moonlight, slithering across the ground like dark water. Some take on shapes of elongated figures with no faces, crouching among the stones, watching with an intent that feels almost human. They move when you do, but never in rhythm, as if mocking your steps. More than one visitor has fled Maplewood with the feeling of being hunted, chased not by footsteps, but by silence itself, thick, oppressive silence, broken only by the sound of their own ragged breath. And then there are the voices. They come from nowhere and everywhere at once, threading through the trees in whispers that chill the blood. Sometimes they are faint, barely more than a sigh. Other times they rise sharp and clear, calling out a single word, help. The first time you hear it, you might think it's a trick of the wind, a fragment of conversation carried from the street beyond. But then it comes again, closer. The plea stretched into something broken and desperate. Help me. Please. Those who make the mistake of speaking into the dark rarely stay long. The temperature drops suddenly. The night presses heavier, and from the corner of the eye comes a flicker of white. A figure standing just beyond reach, her gown rippling, though no breeze stirs the air. The woman in white does not move quickly. She does not need to. She waits and watches, her head tilted as if listening to something only she can hear. Step toward her, and she drifts back, always just out of reach. Turn to leave, and that is when you feel it, the hand, cold as stone, closing lightly on your arm. And when you spin around, no one is there, except the sound of a whisper curling against your ear. Don't go. One man who ventured into Maplewood alone described what happened in a trembling voice weeks later. He had gone in search of proof, armed with a camera and a recorder. For an hour, nothing happened. Then came the lights, weaving between the graves like pale fireflies. He followed them deeper, his breath clouding in air that grew colder with every step. The voices started neck soft at first, then rising, a chorus of broken pleas that seemed to echo from the ground itself. And then he saw her, standing at the edge of the path, her gown luminous against the dark, her head bowed so that her hair hid her face. He lifted the camera, but the screen went black. Then came the whisper, brushing his ear like a kiss of ice. Stay. That was enough. He ran, tripping over stones, heart pounding like thunder. When he reached the gate, he turned for one last look. She was there, at the far end of the path, watching, and she was smiling. Maplewood Cemetery does not forgive curiosity. It draws you in with silence and shadows, with whispers that promise secrets and lights that beckon like stars. But those who go seeking answers rarely find peace. They leave with questions, with nightmares that cling like cobwebs, with the memory of a figure in white gliding among the graves, her hollow eyes following them into the dark. Green Hill Cemetery in Greensboro stands as a quiet reminder of the past, its rolling hills dotted with weathered stones and towering oaks. Established in the 1800s, it holds the remains of soldiers, families, and residents whose lives shaped the city's history. By day, it is serene, almost peaceful. By night, however, the cemetery becomes a place where the living feel watched and the dead refuse to rest. Visitors walking the paths after dusk often speak first of the mist. It drifts low across the graves, thick and white, curling around monuments and weaving between headstones. At first, it seems harmless, even beautiful, but linger, and the mist grows heavy, almost suffocating, pressing against the skin and chilling the bones. Within it, shapes appear dark, humanoid silhouettes that vanish if you stare too long. Some take the form of soldiers, their figures thin and elongated, their faces obscured by shadow, their muskets held loosely at their sides. Others are harder to identify, only glimpses of movement out of the corner of the eye. The most common sightings involve Confederate soldiers, and it is here that the legends of Green Hill are strongest. Locals claim that the spirits of men who fell during the Civil War still patrol the grounds, bound to protect one another, even in death. Witnesses report feeling the presence of someone walking just behind them, keeping pace without a sound. Turn around, and there is no one there, only the echo of their own footsteps and the faint whisper of something unseen. Many who enter Green Hill at night speak of a sensation that cannot be easily explained. It begins as unease, a prickling at the back of the neck. Then comes the certainty that someone or something is following. Shadows stretch in unnatural ways, and even familiar paths feel unfamiliar. The old stones seem to lean closer, their inscriptions fading into shapes that resemble faces, as if the cemetery itself is alive and watching. Strange lights are another hallmark of the cemetery's hauntings. Some describe flickering orbs hovering among the graves, glowing softly before darting away like frightened spirits. Others report sudden bursts of illumination that reveal figures for only a second, men in uniforms, their eyes glinting faintly in the dark before plunging the path back into shadow. Paranormal investigators have tried to capture these phenomena on camera, but the footage is often distorted, the figures blurred into streaks of gray that shift and twist unnaturally. Visitors tell of cold spots that appear without warning, chilling the skin even in warm months. Step into one, and it feels as though invisible hands are pressing against your shoulders, tugging at your clothing, or reaching for your arms. Some report hearing whispers carried on the wind, snippets of conversation, or calls to a name that isn't theirs. Others have felt sudden gusts of air that pass only around them, carrying the faint scent of smoke and iron, reminiscent of gunpowder and battle. One story, recounted by a local historian, involves a man who wandered Green Hill alone on a foggy autumn night. He had come in search of old monuments, but as he walked, he felt a growing weight on his chest and a pressure at the back of his neck. When he glanced behind him, he thought he saw a line of soldiers standing in formation among the stones, their faces unreadable in the darkness. As he froze, the front soldier slowly lifted a hand, pointing directly at him. The man ran, stumbling over the uneven ground, and when he looked back from the safety of the gate, the figures had vanished, but the feeling of eyes on him lingered long after he left. Green Hill Cemetery is more than a resting place. It is a memorial to those who cannot leave. Its legends speak of loyalty beyond death, a bond forged in life and carried through the afterlife. Whether these spirits are guardians, mourners, or something more restless is unknown. What is clear, however, is that the cemetery does not welcome intruders lightly. If you ever find yourself walking the paths of Green Hill after dark, heed the stories, watch the fog, listen for whispers, and feel the weight of unseen eyes. Keep moving, and do not linger among the graves. For the soldiers of Green Hill are still here, still watching, and their vigilance does not end with the sunset. In the quiet heart of Asheville, cradled by the rolling Blue Ridge Mountains, lies Riverside Cemetery. By daylight, it seems serene, almost picturesque, a place where history breathes through moss-covered stones and towering oaks. The French Broad River murmurs nearby, its currents winding like silver threads through the land. But as the sun dips behind the mountains and darkness cloaks the earth, Riverside changes. The peace evaporates, and something stirs, a presence born of water and shadow, lingering where life once slipped away. The first sign is the fog. It comes without warning, slinking through the trees like a living thing. Thick and white, it coils low along the ground, swallowing the paths, curling around the stones until the world feels reduced to gray. And within that fog, there are shapes that move when the air is still, that seem to watch with eyes you cannot see. People who step into the mist speak of sudden cold, a chill that bites deeper than winter, soaking into bone and marrow. Some describe hearing the rush of water, louder and louder, though the river lies far beyond sight. Others hear voices, whispers, that slither through the haze, soft at first, then sharp, urgent, like a warning or a plea. It is said that Riverside is haunted by those who met their end in the French Broad River. Drownings were common in the early years. Fishermen swept away by sudden floods, children pulled under by invisible currents, travelers lost to the black depths. Their bodies were brought here, laid in the soil beside the trees, but their spirits, some believe, never left the water. On certain nights, when the fog rolls thick and the moon hides her face, those spirits rise and drift through the cemetery, searching for something they cannot name. The apparitions come most often near the low ground, where the air smells faintly of moss and river water. They are pale, almost translucent, their forms wavering like reflections in a restless pool. Some are still soaked, their clothing clinging to wasted limbs, droplets falling soundlessly to the earth. Their faces are the worst, gray and slack, lips parted as if gasping for air that will never come, eyes wide with the terror of their final breath. They do not speak, but their mouths open and close in silence, forming words no living tongue can shape. And if you watch too long, if you meet their empty gaze, something cold slips into you, an ache deep in the chest, as though your heart has sunk into water and will never rise again. One story haunts Riverside more than any other, the story of the woman who walks with the fog. They call her the drowned bride. Some say she was left waiting at the altar, her love stolen by the river before their vows were spoken. Others claim she threw herself into its depths, her wedding gown blooming white in the current like a dying flower. Wherever the truth lies, her ghost has been seen for more than 100 years, gliding among the stones in a dress that shimmers like wet silk. Her hair hangs in dripping strands, her skin pale as the moon, and when she lifts her face, her eyes gleam with a hunger that chills the soul. She comes without sound, her bare feet leaving no trace on the earth. At first, she seems almost beautiful, a vision born of mist and moonlight. But if you let her draw near, if you stand frozen while her eyes lock on yours, the illusion cracks. Her mouth opens wide, wider than it should, and the water comes pouring from her lips in black torrents, streaming down her chin, soaking the ground at her feet. Some say the sound of rushing water fills the air then, deafening, relentless, as if the river itself has risen to claim you. And when you run, heart pounding, breath tearing in your throat, the sound follows, chasing you through the trees like a flood. Visitors who escape speak of dreams that follow dreams of dark water closing overhead, of voices chanting in a language older than the mountains, of hands, slick and cold, dragging them down, down, into an endless current. They wake, gasping, lungs aching as though they truly drowned. Some return to Riverside, compelled by something they cannot resist, and some are never seen again. Paranormal investigators have tried to capture proof of what lingers here. Their cameras show strange mists rising where no fog should be, tendrils curling like fingers around the stones, orbs of light flicker in the trees, pulsing with an eerie glow before vanishing into nothing. Audio recordings are worse. They pick up the sound of rushing water when the night is still, and voices faint, layered voices chanting words that scrape the mind raw. On one recording, a single word stands out, clear and cold: come. There are places in Riverside where even the bravest will not walk after sundown. The hollow near the oldest graves, where the fog pools thickest. The bend in the path that curves toward the river, where shadows linger longer than they should. And the monument by the iron fence, where a figure has been seen kneeling in the dark, her body shuddering as though weeping. Step closer, and she lifts her head. Her face is smooth, featureless, like stone worn by centuries of rain. And then she rises. On a quiet street in Concord, beneath the heavy branches of ancient elms, lies a cemetery that wears its age like a crown of shadows. Elm Street Cemetery is not the largest burial ground in North Carolina, nor the most ornate, but it is among the most feared. Here, beneath weather-stained stones and twisted roots, sleep the dead of centuries past if they sleep at all. For when night falls and the fog curls thick across the ground, this place comes alive with whispers and wheels. The legend begins with the sound. Visitors describe it in trembling voices: the distant clatter of hooves striking cobblestone, the groan of wood and iron rolling through the night. At first, it seems far off, almost imagined. But the rhythm grows louder, closer, until it pulses through the ground beneath your feet. You strain your eyes against the dark, searching for the source, and that is when you see it. The phantom carriage, drawn by two black horses whose eyes burn with a cold blue fire. The carriage glides through the gates without a sound. Its wheels turn, yet raise no dust. Its hooves strike, yet leave no mark. The coach is draped in tattered curtains that sway as if stirred by an unseen wind. And the driver, if he can be called, that is worse than the beasts he commands. Cloaked in black, his face hidden in the shadows of a wide-brimmed hat, he sits stiff and silent, skeletal hands gripping the reins. When he turns his head, there is nothing beneath the hat but darkness that seems to swallow the light around it. They say the carriage roams Elm Street Cemetery in search of souls, a relic of some unholy pact forged long ago. Some claim it belonged to a funeral director who desecrated graves for profit, his greed damning him to eternal service. Others whisper of a grieving father who bargained with forces he could not comprehend, trading his own peace for the chance to see his dead child once more. Whatever the truth, the carriage comes still, rolling through the mist to gather passengers that never return. Those who encounter it speak of a paralyzing cold, an air so heavy it drags at the lungs, as though the night itself seeks to draw the breath from your body. The horses halt without warning, their burning eyes fixing on you, and the driver lifts a bony hand, beckoning. If you run, the sound of hooves thunders behind you, echoing through the darkness long after you've escaped the gates. And if you do not run, if you stand frozen, staring into that fathomless void where a face should beat the curtains of the carriage part. A pale hand slips through, thin as bone, and a voice drifts from the shadows inside, soft as a sigh. Ride with us. The phantom carriage is not the only terror haunting Elm Street Cemetery. There are figures here, shadowed and silent, that wander among the stones long after the living have gone. They move without sound, their forms thin and wavering, yet their presence presses close, heavy as earth on a coffin lid. Some kneel at the oldest graves, heads bowed as if in prayer. Others linger near the paths, their hollow eyes glimmering faintly in the dark. One man swore he saw a figure in a tattered cloak crouched atop a monument, its limbs too long, its head cocked at an angle no living neck could bear. When his flashlight beam struck it, the shape vanished, leaving only the echo of laughter curling through the trees. Cold spots bloom here like patches of frost, sudden and savage. Step into one, and it feels as though invisible arms have wrapped around you, clutching tight, leeching the warmth from your skin. Some claim to hear whispers in those icy pockets, snatches of words too broken to understand, voices tangled with grief and rage. Others report the distant sound of sobbing, thin and brittle as glass, drifting from the farthest corner of the grounds. Follow it, and you will find nothing but stones and shadows. Yet the crying continues, threading through the night like a thread you cannot cut. The oldest part of Elm Street Cemetery holds its darkest secrets. Here, the graves tilt like broken teeth, their inscriptions eroded to pale scars on the stone. It is said that those who linger too long among these forgotten dead feel something watching, waiting, a presence that presses against the mind, prying at the edges of thought. People describe sudden visions, a flash of iron wheels turning red with rust, a coffin nailed shut by skeletal hands, a road stretching into blackness where the phantom carriage waits. Some collapse in terror, choking on screams that will not come. Beneath the swaying branches of ancient oaks, Oak Grove Cemetery in Wilmington rests quietly, yet its silence is never quite still. Locals know this coastal burial ground as more than a place of remembrance. It has become one of the most whispered about corners of the city, a place where history and folklore blur together. Generations of residents have walked its winding paths, and many claim they have not walked alone. The cemetery is infamous for its ghostly sightings, unexplainable sounds, and the uneasy feeling that settles in long after the sun dips below the horizon. The cemetery itself is old, older than most of the structures that surround it today. Moss-draped branches create a canopy over crooked tombstones, their inscriptions worn by decades of salt air drifting in from the Atlantic. In daylight, the setting can feel serene, a postcard of southern stillness. But when evening comes, the mood shifts. The air seems to grow heavier, as though carrying the weight of centuries of sorrow. Wilmington has always been tied to the sea, and with the sea came prosperity, piracy, war, and tragedy. Many believe Oak Grove is a vessel that holds all of it still. One of the most enduring tales tied to Oak Grove Cemetery is that of the sailors. Wilmington's history as a port city made it a lifeline for trade, but also a magnet for danger. Countless ships were lost off the Carolina coast, their crews never returning home. Locals say their grief echoes through the cemetery. Visitors have described hearing the faint cries of men carried on the night air, voices that seem to rise and fall like waves. The sound is often accompanied by the sharp scent of salt, even when the wind is still. Some say they hear desperate shouts, like warnings from sailors in their final moments before the sea claimed them. A number of these reports center around the oldest part of the cemetery, where weathered stones lean precariously in rows. In the moonlight, shadows drift between them, too tall and too defined to be tricks of the eyes. People claim to see figures wandering near these graves, only for them to vanish when approached. A handful of accounts describe shapes dressed in tattered coats, their outlines flickering like candlelight. The most chilling detail is their silence. The figures never speak, yet the cries of the sea seem to follow their presence. Stories of piracy are also woven into Oak Grove's lore. Wilmington, like much of the Carolina coast, was once a haven for buccaneers. Ships loaded with stolen treasure anchored near the inlets, and some of those men met their violent ends on shore. Locals whispered that a few were buried hurriedly, without proper rites, their bodies hidden in shallow graves to avoid attention. Whether these accounts are fact or embellished legend, many believe the cemetery carries the restless energy of those who lived and died by the cutlass. Ghostly shadows near certain unmarked plots are said to resemble men clutching ropes or cutlasses, pacing as if standing guard. A few witnesses even claim to have seen the glint of spectral coins in the grass before they disappeared like mist. Yet not all hauntings here are tied to the sea. Wilmington's long history has seen wars, epidemics, and storms, each leaving its mark. Some who walk through Oak Grove describe sudden drops in temperature, as though stepping into invisible pockets of grief. Others speak of a sensation like being watched, eyes boring into their backs from beyond the grave. Paranormal investigators who have visited the site report unexplained recordings, voices captured on static, indistinct words that sound like prayers, curses, or warnings. Photographs taken at the cemetery often reveal orbs or streaks of light hovering near gravestones, impossible to explain with ordinary logic. Among the most unsettling tales is that of the weeping sailor. Several witnesses, decades apart, have described encountering a lone figure kneeling at a grave near the cemetery's edge. His shoulders shake as though racked by sobs, his face obscured by his hands. When approached, the figure fades, leaving only the rustling of the oaks. Locals say this is the spirit of a man who survived shipwreck when his crew did not, a sailor who lived with guilt so strong it bound him even after death. Whether true or not, the story adds to the heavy air that seems to cling to Oak Grove. Despite these frightening accounts, the cemetery holds a strange allure. People continue to visit, drawn by curiosity as much as by reverence. Some find comfort in the idea that the dead are not entirely gone, that their stories live on in whispers and shadows. For Wilmington residents, Oak Grove is more than a resting place. It is a reminder of the city's long entanglement with the sea, of lives cut short by storm, cannon fire, or betrayal. Every flicker of movement among the headstones, every echo in the dark, becomes part of a tradition that keeps the past alive. What strikes many is the duality of Oak Grove. In daylight, families tend to graves, leaving flowers and tokens of remembrance. The space feels sacred, even protective. But as the sun dips low, the very same ground transforms into a stage for the uncanny. The rustle of branches becomes a whisper. The calls of night birds blend with phantom voices, and the stillness grows charged with possibility. It is this balance between peace and unease that makes the cemetery unforgettable. Skeptics argue that the stories are products of imagination, shaped by Wilmington's dramatic history and the eeriness of old cemeteries. They say the cries of sailors are nothing more than the wind, and shadowy figures are tricks of moonlight filtered through branches. Yet those who have felt the chill of Oak Grove, who have seen figures vanish before their eyes, remain convinced that something lingers. In their telling, the cemetery is not haunted in malice, but in memory, a place where the dead still reach toward the living. Oak Grove Cemetery endures as one of Wilmington's most haunted landmarks. Its reputation has become part of the city's identity, a story retold on ghost tours and whispered among locals. But beneath the folklore lies a deeper truth. The cemetery is a monument to the fragile line between life and death, past and present, sea and shore. Every cry in the night, every drifting shadow, reminds visitors that the stories of Wilmington are never truly finished. They live on in the restless echoes of Oak Grove, waiting for the next passerby to hear. Under the quiet skies of North Carolina, Mount Gilead Cemetery rests on a slope of land that feels frozen in time. Rows of weathered gravestones stand among leaning trees, their roots clutching the soil that holds more than just the bodies of the dead. This burial ground, though serene during the day, has earned a reputation that stretches far beyond the borders of its town. It is said to be haunted by the spirits of Civil War soldiers who never left the battlefield behind. To those who know the stories, Mount Gilead Cemetery is not just a resting place. It's a stage where history plays itself out again and again in whispers, shadows, and chilling encounters. The cemetery's origins stretch back to the 19th century, when Mount Gilead was still a quiet community, surrounded by farmland and rolling woods. As the Civil War swept across the South, soldiers from both sides found themselves passing through the region. Many never made it home. Some were buried hastily, their final resting places marked with little more than stone or wood. In Mount Gilead Cemetery, rows of military graves stand as testimony to the young men who lost their lives in the conflict. Their presence lingers in more ways than one. For generations, townsfolk have spoken of strange sounds drifting across the cemetery at night. The most common is the rhythm of boots on gravel, as if a patrol marches through the grounds long after sunset. The steps are steady, deliberate, and heavy, echoing as though carried by unseen soldiers moving in formation. Witnesses who have followed the sounds often find nothing: no footsteps, no footprints, only the stillness of the cemetery pressing in around them. Some swear they have heard the clatter of canteens or the metallic jingle of weapons alongside the march, reinforcing the sense that the dead are still on duty. Shadows are another part of Mount Gilead's legend. Visitors walking among the graves after dusk report figures moving just beyond the reach of their lanterns or flashlights. These shapes are described as tall and thin, some carrying the unmistakable outline of rifles slung across their shoulders. They vanish the moment anyone tries to approach. On moonlit nights, it is not uncommon for people to mistake them for living reenactors till they realize the cemetery is deserted. One story tells of a local teenager who cut through the cemetery on his way home. He saw a man in a gray uniform standing by a headstone, his face hidden under the brim of a hat. When the boy called out, the soldier turned, revealing hollow eyes before dissolving into mist. Perhaps the most chilling accounts involve ghostly apparitions dressed in full uniform. Some described them as Confederate soldiers, others as Union, their faded coats and caps appearing briefly before melting into the darkness. These encounters are often accompanied by an unexplainable coldness, even on the warmest summer evenings. In some cases, the soldiers are seen not standing still but moving purposefully across the cemetery grounds, as though retracing patrol routes or searching for fallen comrades. A few stories tell of groups of 3 or 4 figures marching silently together, their steps in perfect unison before fading into nothing. The sounds and sights are unsettling enough, but they are not the only signs of lingering spirits. Strange smells, gunpowder, smoke, or damp earth are reported drifting through the cemetery with no source. Others describe hearing distant voices, low murmurs that sound like men speaking under their breath. Some claim to hear shouted orders carried on the wind, commands too faint to understand, yet forceful enough to send a shiver down the spine. Paranormal investigators who have visited Mount Gilead report capturing unusual audio recordings, from faint drum beats to what seems like a bugle call, echoing faintly in the background. One particularly well-known story involves a caretaker who once lived near the cemetery. Late one night, he was awakened by the sound of horses' hooves striking the ground. Believing someone had wandered onto the property, he went outside to investigate. What he saw was a group of horsemen moving silently across the edge of the cemetery. Their outlines were pale, almost translucent, and though the horses appeared to move, there was no sound except the pounding that rattled the caretaker's ears. The vision lasted only moments before vanishing, but the man never doubted what he had seen. Despite the haunting tales, the cemetery draws many visitors, not just for its ghostly reputation, but for its deep historical ties. The Civil War shaped every corner of North Carolina, and Mount Gilead stands as a reminder of the human cost of the conflict. Some locals believe the sightings are not spirits trapped in unrest, but echoes of memory, imprints of lives cut short and moments too powerful to fade completely. Others believe the soldiers are restless, their duty unfinished, their loyalty binding them to the cemetery even in death. Skeptics argue that the legends grow from imagination and suggestion. Old cemeteries are naturally eerie, and the power of the Civil War's legacy can shape the way people interpret what they see and hear. Yet for those who have walked through Mount Gilead under starlight, the experience is not so easily dismissed. The sensation of being watched, the sudden drop in temperature, the fleeting glimpse of a figure where no one should stand, these are not things that fade quickly from memory. By day, Mount Gilead Cemetery is a place of solemn beauty, its headstones worn by rain and time, its paths lined with quiet dignity. Families visit to leave flowers, history enthusiasts come to study the names carved in stone, and the living honor the sacrifices of those buried there. But by night, it transforms into something else. The veil between past and present feels thinner. The boundaries between the living and the dead seem less certain. Every gust of wind becomes a whisper, every shadow a soldier still keeping watch. Mount Gilead Cemetery remains one of the most mysterious sites in North Carolina, a place where the Civil War's ghosts still seem to march. Whether one believes the stories or not, the effect is undeniable. To walk among the graves is to step into history, to feel the weight of sacrifice, and to wonder if the past ever truly rests. For many, the answer lies in the flicker of movement at the corner of the eye, and the sound of boots on gravel, and the silent figures that vanish when confronted. In Mount Gilead, the war is never completely over, and the soldiers never fully gone. Zion Cemetery in Winston-Salem rests quietly behind its wrought iron gates, a patch of land where time seems suspended. To the casual visitor, it appears like many other historic burial grounds in North Carolina. Rows of gravestones tilted by the years, trees bending in the wind, and the constant hush of nature weaving around the markers of lives long past. Yet beneath this stillness lies a deeper current, one that locals and visitors alike have spoken of for generations. Zion is a place heavy with stories, whispered legends, and encounters that defy explanation. Among them, none is more enduring or more chilling than the tale of the grieving mother. The legend tells of a woman who lost her child centuries ago. Though accounts differ on whether it was illness, accident, or tragedy that claimed the young life, what all versions agree upon is the depth of her sorrow. Heartbroken, she visited the cemetery daily, her figure seen wandering between the stones, always pausing at her child's grave. Some say her grief was so overwhelming that it never faded, even after death. Locals believe her spirit lingers still, returning night after night in search of the one she could not protect. To this day, visitors claim to see a woman dressed in pale garments, her head bowed as if weeping, slowly moving through the cemetery's shadows. She is said to vanish when approached, leaving only the sound of rustling leaves and the chilling sense of loss that lingers long after. The apparition of the grieving mother is only the most famous of the cemetery's mysteries. Zion has long been associated with glowing lights that drift across the grounds after sunset. These orbs appear in colors ranging from faint white to pale blue, hovering near headstones before sliding silently through the air. Paranormal enthusiasts who have brought cameras and equipment to document the phenomenon often report capturing strange flashes of light even when no one present saw them. Some believe the orbs are manifestations of restless spirits attempting to communicate, while others describe them as symbols of sorrow, the emotions of the dead condensed into ghostly flame. Visitors who encounter these lights rarely leave unchanged. Many describe an overwhelming sense of sadness, as if the weight of untold grief presses down upon them. Some recount hearing faint cries or whispers carried by the night air, sounds that seem to echo from nowhere. The cemetery has been the site of numerous stories of sudden cold spots, patches of icy air that seem to appear without warning, even during the warmest summer evenings. For those who believe in the supernatural, these experiences are taken as signs of spirits attempting to reach across the veil, desperate to be acknowledged. Though the grieving mother dominates the lore of Zion Cemetery, she is not the only figure said to haunt the grounds. Reports tell of other apparitions. A man in an old-fashioned suit standing silently by the gates, a child darting between the headstones, and figures seen kneeling as if in prayer before disappearing into the night. These sightings are often fleeting, little more than shapes glimpsed out of the corner of the eye. Yet they add to the cemetery's reputation as one of Winston-Salem's most haunted sites. Historians suggest that the sorrow tied to Zion Cemetery may be connected to the hardships faced by the community. During the 19th century, epidemics swept through the region, claiming young and old alike. Wars brought their own share of grief, leaving families broken and futures uncertain. Many of the gravestones in Zion mark the final resting places of children, soldiers, and mothers who died far too soon. It is not difficult to imagine why the atmosphere of the cemetery feels charged with emotion, as though the very earth remembers the suffering it holds. Those who have visited Zion after dark often describe a powerful sense of being watched. Some say the feeling is not hostile, but deeply unsettling, like the weight of unseen eyes filled with sorrow. One story tells of a group of college students who entered the cemetery at night on a dare. They claimed to see a dim figure walking ahead of them, its form glowing faintly in the dark. When they tried to follow, the figure stopped, turned, and seemed to lift its arms in a gesture of anguish before fading away. Shaken, the students fled, and none of them ever attempted to return. Another widely shared tale involves a local man who frequently jogged past the cemetery at dusk. One evening, he glanced through the fence and saw what he thought was a woman kneeling at a grave. Concerned, he called out, but she did not move. When he stepped closer, the figure lifted her head, and he realized her face was pale and blurred, as though made of smoke. She vanished before his eyes, leaving only the memory of her sorrowful form burned into his mind. He never jogged that route again after nightfall. Paranormal investigators who have studied Zion Cemetery bring back recordings filled with unexplained sounds, sobs, whispers, and voices calling names that no one recognizes. Some photographs show streaks of light or cloudy shapes hovering near headstones. Equipment designed to measure electromagnetic activity often spikes unexpectedly, particularly near the graves of children. For those who seek proof of the supernatural, Zion provides an abundance of unsettling evidence. Still, not everyone accepts the legends at face value. Skeptics argue that glowing lights are nothing more than reflections, fireflies, or tricks of the eye. The feeling of unease may be caused by the natural eeriness of old cemeteries combined with the power of suggestion. Yet even skeptics admit that Zion has a presence unlike most places, a heaviness that is hard to explain away. Whether psychological or supernatural, the effect is real enough to leave lasting impressions on those who enter. During the day, Zion Cemetery is a place of quiet respect. Families visit graves, caretakers tend to the grounds, and the land feels still and ordinary. But as night falls, the character of the cemetery changes. The air grows heavier, the shadows stretch longer, and the silence deepens into something uncanny. The grieving mother's legend lives strongest in those hours, as visitors leave convinced they have brushed against the sorrow of the dead. Oak Hill Cemetery in Raleigh is a place where history and legend intertwine beneath a canopy of ancient trees. By day, it appears to be a solemn sanctuary, with rows of headstones weathered by decades of wind and rain. The grounds are peaceful, the silence broken only by birdsong and the occasional crunch of footsteps on gravel. Yet when the sun dips behind the horizon, Oak Hill transforms. The stillness becomes charged, the air feels heavier, and the cemetery's reputation begins to breathe life. Known for its chilling stories and eerie encounters, it has become one of Raleigh's most whispered about haunts. One of the most infamous legends tied to Oak Hill is that of the Headless Horseman. Unlike the tale popularized in literature, this story is distinctly local, rooted in Raleigh's own past. The legend speaks of a soldier who lost his life during the Civil War, decapitated in battle. According to the story, his body was buried in Oak Hill, while his head was never recovered. Restless, he is said to rise from his grave on certain nights, mounted on a dark horse that glides silently across the cemetery. Witnesses describe the figure as imposing and spectral, the horse's eyes glowing faintly while the rider's neck ends in emptiness. Some have claimed to hear the pounding of hooves on the ground, though no tracks are left behind. The Headless Horseman is not often seen clearly. He appears fleetingly in the distance, or as a shadow moving impossibly fast through the trees, vanishing before anyone can get close. The Headless Rider may be the cemetery's most famous tale. But it is far from the only mystery Oak Hill holds. Visitors often report flickering lights moving between the graves. These strange illuminations are not lanterns or flashlights, but glowing orbs that shimmer in colors ranging from soft white to pale blue. They drift silently, sometimes hovering near a particular headstone, other times darting across the grounds as if leading onlookers somewhere unseen. Paranormal investigators who have studied the cemetery say these lights are difficult to explain. Cameras capture flashes and streaks of illumination where no natural source exists. And some believe the lights are manifestations of spirits lingering on the grounds, attempting to communicate with the living. Shadowy figures are another frequent report from Oak Hill. Many describe tall, indistinct shapes moving just beyond clear vision, slipping from one grave to another. Some are said to stand perfectly still, watching from a distance, until the observer turns away. Others move with surprising speed, vanishing the moment a light shines upon them. These dark silhouettes are often associated with a feeling of dread, as though something unseen presses in on those who encounter them. People walking the cemetery after nightfall tell of being followed by footsteps that stop when they stop, and resume only when they continue moving. The sensation of being watched in Oak Hill is so strong that even skeptics admit to feeling unsettled. Adding to the strangeness is the recurring presence of an unmistakable smell. Smoke drifting through the air in the dead of night. It is not the clean scent of wood burning, but a heavier odor, reminiscent of fire and ash. Some believe it recalls the days when Raleigh endured fires during wartime, when destruction hung thick in the air. Others connect it to the Civil War, dead buried in the cemetery, suggesting the smell is an echo of gunpowder and cannon fire. Whatever the cause, the scent often appears suddenly, with no source nearby, and fades just as quickly. Those who have encountered it say the smell leaves behind a feeling of unease, as though it is a reminder of violent moments long past. Local stories tell of other apparitions as well. One speaks of a woman dressed in black who wanders the cemetery weeping softly. She is said to kneel at a grave before vanishing into thin air. Another involves a young child who appears near the edge of the cemetery, laughing or calling out before running into the darkness and disappearing. These stories, passed down over generations, contribute to the aura of mystery that surrounds Oak Hill, giving the impression that the cemetery is home to more than one restless soul. Paranormal investigators who have visited Oak Hill report unusual recordings and unexplained activity. Voices are sometimes captured on static, whispering words too faint to understand. Devices used to measure temperature detect sudden drops in the air, and electromagnetic meters often spike near certain graves without explanation. Photographs reveal misty shapes or streaks of light hovering over headstones. While skeptics argue these phenomena can be explained by natural causes or equipment error, the sheer number of reports makes Oak Hill stand out as one of the most active haunted cemeteries in the region. What makes Oak Hill especially unsettling is its atmosphere. Many cemeteries carry a sense of reverence and sadness, but Oak Hill seems infused with tension, as though the boundary between the living and the dead is thin. Visitors frequently describe an oppressive silence that deepens after dusk, a quiet so complete that even the chirping of crickets feels absent. In that silence, every sound, a rustle of leaves, a snap of a twig beak, becomes amplified, feeding the imagination and heightening the sense that someone unseen lingers nearby. Skeptics maintain that ghost stories are born from fear and suggestion, especially in a setting as naturally eerie as a cemetery. They argue that flickering lights can be fireflies or reflections, that shadows are tricks of the eye, and that the smell of smoke is carried on the wind from distant chimneys. Yet even the most skeptical cannot deny the intensity of the experiences reported at Oak Hill. The consistency of the tales, repeated sightings of the same horseman, the same glowing lights, the same ghostly figures, lends weight to the belief that something unusual resides within its gates. During the day, Oak Hill Cemetery is a place of remembrance, where families visit to honor their loved ones and historians reflect on Raleigh's past. The grounds are carefully kept, and the sunlight softens the harsh edges of weathered stones. But at night, the cemetery shifts into something else entirely. the stories come alive. Shadows stretch long across the grass, and the presence of the unseen becomes almost palpable. Oak Hill remains one of Raleigh's most storied cemeteries, a place where the past refuses to rest quietly. The Headless Horseman continues to ride in local legend, joined by flickering lights, drifting shadows, and the faint smell of smoke that clings to the night air. Whether these are spirits trapped between worlds or echoes of memory imprinted on the land, the effect is undeniable. To walk through Oak Hill after dark is to step into a living story, one shaped by grief, battle, and mystery. It is a reminder that history does not always sleep, and that some spirits may never truly leave the ground where their stories ended. Forest Lawn Cemetery in Charlotte stretches across rolling ground, an old and sprawling landscape marked by rows of gravestones and the weight of memory. By day, it is a place of reflection, its winding paths lined with oak and pine, its silence broken only by birdsong or the sigh of wind through branches. But by night, the cemetery takes on a different character. The shadows lengthen, the air thickens, and visitors often leave with stories they cannot explain. With decades of whispered tales and strange encounters, Forest Lawn has become known as one of the most paranormally active sites in North Carolina. Many of the stories begin the same way, with footsteps echoing through empty sections of the cemetery. Visitors exploring after dusk have reported the sound of boots crunching gravel or heels tapping against stone walkways, even when no one else is around. These footsteps often follow closely behind, quickening or slowing to match the pace of the living. Some describe the sensation of being pursued, only to turn and find nothing but empty ground. A few who dare to remain longer say the footsteps eventually stop, replaced by an overwhelming silence that feels even more unsettling. Equally unnerving are the reports of cold spots scattered throughout the cemetery. Even on hot summer nights, patches of air drop to an icy chill, cold enough to raise goosebumps and make the hair on the back of the neck stand on end. These sudden shifts in temperature seem to hover near certain graves or beneath the spreading branches of old trees. Paranormal investigators who have measured the phenomenon note that the cold spots defy natural explanation, appearing and vanishing without reason. For those who experience them, the chill is often accompanied by a deep sense of unease, as though an unseen presence has drawn near. Strange figures are another staple of Forest Lawn's ghost lore. Witnesses describe fleeting glimpses of shadowy forms moving between the headstones, tall and indistinct, vanishing before they can be approached. Others claim to see more defined apparitions. A man in a long coat standing silently by a mausoleum, a woman in pale clothing drifting slowly across the grass, or even groups of figures huddled together as though in quiet conversation. These sightings are often accompanied by an inexplicable heaviness in the air, as though the spirits of the past are still bound to the cemetery, lingering where their bodies were laid to rest. One of the most widely repeated tales involves a woman in white, often spotted, wandering along the cemetery's central paths. Her appearance is sudden, her form faintly glowing in the dark. Some say she moves with purpose, heading toward a particular section of graves before vanishing. Others believe she is searching for someone, her sorrow keeping her from finding peace. Visitors who have encountered her speak of a powerful wave of sadness that lingers long after the vision fades. A sorrow so heavy that it feels borrowed from another soul. There are also reports of phantom voices drifting through the cemetery at night. Low murmurs, fragments of conversations, and even laughter have been heard among the graves. On rare occasions, visitors claim to hear their own names whispered in the darkness, carried on the wind, though no one is nearby. Paranormal investigators have captured recordings filled with unexplained sounds, faint cries, soft weeping, and disembodied words that seem to rise from nowhere. These voices add another layer to the mystery of Forest Lawn, as if the dead themselves are attempting to reach across the barrier that separates them from the living. The reputation of the cemetery as a hotspot for paranormal activity has drawn numerous investigators over the years. Many leave with stories of strange equipment, readings, unexplained photographs, and personal encounters that shake their skepticism. Cameras have picked up glowing orbs floating near headstones, or streaks of light zigzagging through the darkness. Electromagnetic detectors often spike without reason, particularly near older graves. Thermal imaging reveals shapes where no living person stands. Those who come searching for signs of the supernatural often leave convinced they have found them. Local legends deepen the cemetery's aura of mystery. Some say the restless spirits belong to soldiers buried there, their duty unfinished. Others believe they are tied to families torn apart by illness, accident, or hardship, their grief leaving a mark that lingers even after death. Stories circulate of children's laughter ringing faintly in the distance, of figures kneeling in prayer only to vanish when approached, of sudden winds rising from nowhere to scatter leaves across the stones. Each tale adds to the cemetery's reputation, making it a place where history and haunting seem to merge. For those who visit, the feeling of forest lawn is what stays most in the memory. Even skeptics admit to the strange atmosphere that settles over the grounds after dark. The silence becomes too deep, the shadows too heavy, the sense of being watched too insistent to dismiss. Every rustle of leaves feels purposeful, every flicker of light a possible sign of something more. The cemetery becomes a stage for the imagination. Yet the consistency of the stories suggests more than imagination alone is at work. Skeptics argue that the tales grow from suggestion, the natural eeriness of cemeteries, and the human tendency to find patterns in shadows and sounds. Footsteps may be echoes, cold spots the product of shifting air currents, and voices nothing more than tricks of hearing. Yet even skeptics leave Forest Lawn with unease, unsettled by the intensity of the stories and the sheer number of people who share similar accounts. Whether real or imagined, the experiences carry weight, leaving visitors reluctant to dismiss them entirely. By daylight, Forest Lawn Cemetery is a place of quiet dignity. Its paths welcoming families who come to honor loved ones and caretakers who tend the grounds. But as darkness falls, its identity changes. The gravestones become silhouettes, the trees stand like sentinels, and the legends take hold. The footsteps echo again, the cold spots return, and the shadowy figures resume their watch. Forest Lawn Cemetery holds a special place in Charlotte's ghostly folklore. It is not simply a resting ground for the dead, but a place where stories of the supernatural continue to thrive, passed down through generations of residents and visitors. Those who walk its paths at night may leave with a shiver, a lingering sadness, or a sense that unseen eyes followed their every step. Whether the cemetery is truly haunted, or whether the mind shapes the experience from fear and legend, its power cannot be denied. Forest Lawn remains a place where the past refuses to be silent, and where the line between the living and the dead feels far too thin. Mount Hope Cemetery in Fayetteville carries with it the weight of a somber past, its grounds shaped by centuries of sorrow, illness, and loss. The burial ground rests quietly beneath sprawling trees and weathered monuments, but the stillness does not always bring peace. It is a place steeped in stories of tragedy and shadow, where whispers of the dead seem to rise with the evening air. For many, Mount Hope is not merely a cemetery, but a haunted stage where echoes of the past continue to stir, unsettling those who dare to walk its paths after dark. The history of Mount Hope is inseparable from Fayetteville's long struggles with disease and hardship. Epidemics swept through the region in the 19th century, leaving families broken and entire communities grieving. Yellow fever, influenza, and other outbreaks struck again and again, claiming children, mothers, and soldiers alike. The cemetery became a final resting place for countless victims, and with each wave of tragedy, it grew heavier with grief. Some locals believe this layered history of suffering left behind more than unmarked graves. It left spirits unable to move on, their sorrow embedded in the land itself. Visitors to Mount Hope often describe hearing faint cries drifting across the grounds at night. The sounds are unsettling, resembling the soft weeping of children or the anguished moans of adults caught in despair. Sometimes the cries rise suddenly, carried on the wind as if coming from everywhere at once. Other times they are faint, just beyond recognition, teasing the ear with the suggestion of a voice calling from the darkness. Paranormal investigators who have brought recording devices to the cemetery claim to have captured muffled sobs and even words too distorted to identify, as though voices from the past are struggling to be heard. Another phenomenon frequently reported at Mount Hope is the appearance of glowing orbs. These strange spheres of light hover near gravestones, dance between trees, and drift silently across the open grass. Witnesses describe them as white, blue, or pale green. Their glow faint but undeniable against the dark. They often appear in groups, clustering near particular sections of the cemetery before disappearing without warning. Some speculate the orbs are manifestations of spirits, while others think they are visual remnants of the suffering endured during the cemetery's darkest days. For those who see them, the experience is often accompanied by an overwhelming sense of sorrow, as though the lights are tied directly to restless souls still trying to be acknowledged. Perhaps the most unnerving accounts from Mount Hope involve the sensation of being touched by unseen hands. Visitors speak of feeling a light brush against their arm, a tug at their sleeve, or even the sensation of fingers grazing the back of their neck. These experiences often occur when the person is standing alone, far from others, with no explanation for the contact. In some cases, the touch is described as gentle, almost pleading, while in others it feels sharp and cold, leaving the victim shaken. The invisible hands are said to appear most often near the oldest graves, where the names and dates have nearly faded away, as if the forgotten are reaching out for acknowledgement. Local legends tell of other apparitions as well. A woman in a long dress has been seen wandering near the center of the cemetery, her face obscured as she moves slowly from grave to grave. Some believe she is a grieving mother searching for the children she lost to disease, her sorrow binding her to the earth. There are also tales of a shadowy figure that lingers at the far edge of the cemetery, tall and unmoving, watching silently until it disappears into the night. A few visitors have reported hearing footsteps following them along the paths, steady and deliberate, though the cemetery remained empty. Mount Hope has drawn the attention of paranormal investigators from across the state, many of whom label it one of Fayetteville's most active haunted sites. Their equipment has recorded unexplained voices, sudden temperature drops, and spikes of electromagnetic activity around certain graves. Cameras have captured streaks of light and misty forms, while thermal imaging has revealed shapes moving where no living person stood. Some investigators report leaving the grounds with an overwhelming heaviness, as though the sorrow of the cemetery clung to them even after they departed. Despite these chilling stories, the cemetery continues to draw visitors intrigued by its history and mystery. Some come seeking evidence of the supernatural, while others visit simply to honor the past. Even skeptics, who dismiss the tales as imagination, stirred by the natural eeriness of old cemeteries, admit that Mount Hope carries an atmosphere difficult to ignore. The silence there feels different, more profound, and the shadows seem deeper than in other places. Whether one believes in spirits or not, the weight of tragedy is unmistakable. The most unsettling experiences, however, come not from what is seen or heard, but from what is felt. Countless visitors describe an unshakable sense of sorrow pressing down on them the moment they cross through the gates. It is as though the grief of generations hangs heavy in the air, surrounding the living with emotions that do not belong to them. Some leave with tears in their eyes, unable to explain why the sadness struck so suddenly. Others describe dreams of the cemetery after their visit, haunted by images of faceless figures and ghostly lights. By daylight, Mount Hope is a place of quiet respect. Families still visit, placing flowers on graves worn by time, and caretakers tend to the grounds with care. But when the sun sets, the cemetery transforms. The cries seem louder in the stillness, the orbs more visible against the dark, and the invisible hands more eager to make their presence known. It is a place where history and haunting overlap, where sorrow has become so deeply etched into the earth that it refuses to fade. Mount Hope Cemetery stands as both a memorial to Fayetteville's painful past and as one of its most haunted locations. The stories of cries in the night, glowing orbs, and unseen touches are not isolated incidents, but part of a long tradition of encounters shared by locals and visitors alike. Whether one believes these experiences are born of restless spirits or the power of imagination fueled by grief, the effect is undeniable. To walk through Mount Hope after dark is to step into a place where history feels alive, where sorrow still lingers, and where the dead seem unwilling or unable to rest. Beulah Cemetery in Thomasville may be small compared to sprawling city graveyards, but its modest size does nothing to diminish the weight of its legends. Nestled among quiet trees and bordered by worn fences, it holds an atmosphere that many describe as heavy and unsettling. The air seems different here, charged with a tension that grows stronger after the sun disappears. While many cemeteries inspire feelings of reverence and sadness, Beulah is known for something else entirely. It is a place of whispered laughter, phantom footsteps, and the chilling presence of ghostly children who seem unwilling to leave the grounds where they were laid to rest. The most common stories surrounding Beulah focus on the sound of children playing. Visitors report faint laughter drifting through the cemetery at night, soft at first, then growing distinct enough to be recognized for what it is. Sometimes it comes from the far end of the cemetery. Other times it seems to circle around, moving from one cluster of graves to another. What makes the phenomenon so chilling is the emptiness of the place. More than one visitor has walked through the grounds searching for the source of the sound, only to find silence as soon as they stop to listen. A few have insisted they felt the laughter was directed at them, as though the unseen children were not simply playing, but acknowledging the presence of the living. Alongside the laughter are the unmistakable sounds of footsteps. Gravel crunches under unseen feet, and dry leaves rustle as if someone is darting between the trees. The footsteps often follow visitors, keeping pace with them through the narrow paths. At times they stop suddenly, only to resume a few moments later, from an entirely different direction. Those who have experienced this describe an unnerving sensation of being trailed by something just out of sight, never seen but always close. The footsteps, like the laughter, vanish without explanation, leaving behind a silence that feels even more oppressive than before. Some of the legends at Beulah Cemetery tie directly to the graves of children, marked by small, time-worn stones. Locals say these graves are the heart of the cemetery's haunting. Many believe the spirits of children who died young linger here, their restless energy unable to move on. Witnesses claim to see small figures darting across the grounds, their movements quick and fleeting, disappearing when approached. On moonlit nights, some visitors have reported the outline of a child standing near a headstone, still and silent, watching with eyes that glimmer faintly before fading away into shadow. There are darker tales as well. A few accounts speak of children's voices calling out in the dark, not in laughter but in pleading tones. The words are indistinct, but the sorrow in them is unmistakable. Paranormal investigators who have recorded audio at Beulah report capturing faint cries and muffled voices that seem to belong to children. In some cases, they claim to have heard their own names spoken back to them, as though the spirits were reaching out directly. These encounters often leave visitors shaken, convinced that the dead are aware of their presence and desperate to be acknowledged. Another unnerving detail often shared is the sensation of being touched. People walking through the cemetery sometimes feel a tug on their clothing or the brush of a small hand against their own. Unlike the heavy, chilling touch often described at other haunted cemeteries, Beulah's ghostly touches are said to feel lighter, almost playful, yet just as disturbing. The idea of unseen children reaching out from beyond the grave unsettles even the most skeptical, leaving them unable to dismiss the possibility of something lingering in the dark. The cemetery's eerie reputation has drawn paranormal investigators, many of whom leave convinced of its activity. Cold spots appear without warning, often near children's graves, sending shivers through even the warmest summer night. Cameras capture streaks of light or orbs floating above headstones, while recording devices pick up faint giggles, whispers, and the sound of shuffling feet. On more than one occasion, investigators have reported battery drains on their equipment, as though unseen forces are feeding on the energy. The consistency of these findings adds to the cemetery's status as one of the most unnerving haunted sites in the region. For residents of Thomasville, Beulah Cemetery has become more than just a burial ground. It is a source of legend, caution, and fascination. Stories are passed down through generations, with parents warning children not to linger there after dark, and teenagers daring each other to spend a night among the graves. Many return with tales of shadows darting across the grass, or the disembodied sound of giggles echoing in the still air. Whether fueled by imagination or genuine supernatural encounters, the stories refuse to fade. What makes Beulah especially chilling is the nature of the hauntings themselves. Ghostly children evoke emotions that are far more complex than simple fear. There is sadness in the idea of lives cut short, of laughter silenced too soon. There is also unease in the thought of innocence lingering in death, twisted into something uncanny by its persistence. The laughter that might bring joy in daylight becomes something else entirely when it echoes across a silent cemetery at midnight. It blurs the line between playfulness and menace, between comfort and dread. Skeptics argue that the sounds can be explained by natural causes. Laughter may be the calls of night birds mistaken by the human ear. Footsteps, nothing more than animals moving through the underbrush. The sensations of touch could be the result of suggestion, heightened by the eerie environment of the cemetery. Yet even skeptics admit that Beulah has an atmosphere unlike most places, a weight in the air that is difficult to rationalize away. The stories are too consistent, repeated across decades by people with no connection to one another, to be dismissed entirely. During the day, Beulah Cemetery is a quiet place. Sunlight filters through the trees, casting soft light on the small headstones that mark generations past. Families visit to leave flowers, and caretakers tend the grounds with care. But at night, the entire atmosphere changes. The laughter returns, faint but unmistakable. The footsteps echo where no one walks, and the shadows of children seem to linger just out of reach, waiting for anyone brave enough to step onto the grounds. Beulah Cemetery stands as a reminder that even the smallest of places can hold the greatest of mysteries. Its legends of ghostly children and unexplained sounds make it one of the most haunting sights in Thomasville, a place where sorrow and playfulness intertwine in unsettling ways. Whether one believes the stories are the work of restless spirits or the imagination sharpened by fear, the effect is the same. To walk through Beulah Cemetery after dark is to feel watched, followed, and touched by something unseen. To hear laughter where no living child plays, and to leave with the conviction that some voices never truly fall silent. Calvary Cemetery in Jacksonville rests quietly on the edge of town, its grounds covered in weathered stones, leaning crosses, and ancient trees that creak in the night wind. By day, it feels like a solemn place of remembrance, where families leave flowers and caretakers tend to the grounds with respect. But once the sun sinks below the horizon, the mood of the cemetery shifts. The silence becomes heavier, the shadows grow deeper, and those who step inside after dark often speak of an unsettling presence that seems to linger just beyond sight. At the heart of its chilling legends is the story of a ghostly priest, a spectral figure said to roam the cemetery, watching, guiding, or perhaps warning those who enter. The tales of the priest's ghost go back generations. Some say he was once a devoted caretaker of the cemetery, a man of faith who looked after the dead with tireless dedication. Others believe he was a local clergyman who performed countless funerals here and considered the cemetery his sacred duty, even after death. Whatever his true origin, the stories agree on one thing: his spirit has never left. Dozens of visitors have claimed to see him wandering the grounds at night, his figure tall and draped in the long robes of his order, his face pale and solemn, and his presence impossible to ignore. Many who have encountered the ghost describe the same feeling, an overwhelming sense of being watched. Long before the spectral priest is seen, visitors say they feel his eyes on them, as if he were standing just a few feet away. It begins with a prickling at the back of the neck, a chill that runs down the spine, and the sudden conviction that they are not alone. Some try to brush it off as imagination, but the sensation grows stronger with every step. Those who have looked around in that moment often report catching the faint glimpse of movement near the graves. A shadowy figure gliding between headstones, there one moment and gone the next. Sudden chills are another hallmark of Calvary Cemetery's haunting. Paranormal investigators have documented temperature drops of 10 to 15 degrees in certain areas, even on warm summer nights. Visitors describe walking through the cemetery and suddenly feeling the icy weight of cold air press down on them, as if they had stepped into a different realm entirely. The cold often comes without wind or weather to explain it, clinging to the skin and lingering until the visitor moves away. Some say these chills are the priest's way of making his presence known, a brush of otherworldly energy that cannot be ignored. The most striking encounters are, of course, direct sightings of the ghostly priest himself. Witnesses say he appears most often near the center of the cemetery, where the oldest graves are found. His figure emerges from the shadows, sometimes faint and translucent, other times startlingly clear. He is described as tall, dressed in long black robes, with a somber expression that seems carved into his features. A few have claimed to see him holding a rosary, his head bowed as though in silent prayer. Others say he simply stands still, watching from a distance, before vanishing into thin air when approached. The silence that follows his disappearance is often described as deafening, as if the entire cemetery itself pauses in his wake. Not all stories of the priest are frightening. Some visitors believe he is a guardian spirit, protecting the cemetery and the souls resting within it. They describe feeling strangely comforted in his presence, as though he is ensuring no harm comes to the graves or the living who pass among them. Others, however, insist that his intentions are darker. These witnesses speak of oppressive fear in his presence, of feeling unwelcome and even pushed away, as if the priest resents intruders, disturbing his sacred ground. The conflicting accounts only add to the mystery. Was the priest a benevolent figure in life whose spirit continues to watch over the cemetery, or has death twisted his devotion into something less forgiving? Paranormal investigators who have studied Calvary Cemetery bring back chilling evidence to support the legends. Audio recordings have captured the faint murmur of prayers in Latin, whispered in a voice too low to belong to any living person nearby. Cameras have snapped misty figures standing near headstones when no one was present, and video footage has revealed strange orbs of light hovering in the night air. Some investigators even claim to have seen the priest with their own eyes, his robes shifting as he moved silently across the cemetery, only to vanish when they tried to approach. One of the most famous stories involves a group of locals who dared each other to walk through Calvary Cemetery after midnight. As they moved deeper among the graves, they began to hear footsteps echoing behind them, though the paths were empty. The air grew icy cold, and several felt an unseen force pressing against their chests, as though urging them to turn back. When they finally reached the oldest section of the cemetery, they froze. Standing near a large cross was the figure of the priest, his hands folded in front of him. He did not move, did not speak, but his presence was undeniable. Terrified, the group fled, but one member looked back long enough to see him slowly raise a hand, as if giving a final blessing or a warning. Stories like these continue to spread through Jacksonville, fueling the cemetery's reputation as one of the most haunted places in the area. Locals pass down tales of the ghostly priest to each new generation, and thrill seekers still sneak into the cemetery at night, hoping to catch a glimpse for themselves. Some leave with nothing more than the memory of eerie silence and strange chills, while others insist they have seen him, standing tall among the stones, a guardian who cannot rest. By day, Calvary Cemetery is a place of peace and remembrance. But when the night falls, the ghostly priest is said to walk again, his shadow stretching across the graves he once tended in life. Whether he is a protector or a restless soul depends on whom you ask. But all agree on one thing. His presence is real, his watchful gaze impossible to escape. In the silence of the cemetery, with the chill of the air pressing close, visitors are left with the unshakable conviction that they are not alone. Riverside Cemetery in Wilmington sits along the coastal landscape like a quiet sentinel, its grounds marked with weathered stones and shaded by ancient oaks that sway in the salt-kissed breeze. By day, it has the atmosphere of solemn remembrance, a place where history and loss are written into every grave marker. But when night settles in, Riverside becomes something else entirely. The whispers of Wilmington's maritime past stir among the headstones, and those who wander the paths after dark often report encounters that defy explanation. It is a cemetery steeped in the lore of sailors, their spirits said to return from the restless seas, carried inland by fogs that seem to rise out of nowhere. For many locals, the most unsettling aspect of Riverside is its association with the spectral presence of ghostly sailors. Wilmington's history as a bustling port town is filled with stories of men who went to sea and never returned. Storms, piracy, naval battles, and shipwrecks claimed countless lives. And for those who never found a grave at sea, Riverside became the final resting place. Yet, some say their spirits are not content to rest. Figures dressed in sailors' uniforms have been spotted wandering the grounds, their faces pale and vacant, their steps slow and heavy, as though they are still walking the decks of long-lost ships. Witnesses often describe seeing these apparitions emerge from patches of fog, only to dissolve into mist as quickly as they appeared. The fog itself is one of Riverside's most persistent mysteries. Visitors often speak of strange mists that roll across the cemetery on otherwise clear nights. Unlike natural fog, which drifts from the river or lingers low to the ground, this mist rises suddenly, enveloping headstones and winding through the paths with eerie precision. Paranormal investigators believe it may be tied to the restless energy of the sailors' spirits, a physical manifestation of their presence. Those who have walked into the fog describe the unsettling sensation of being surrounded, as if unseen figures were moving within the haze. Sometimes shapes appear within its shoulders, faces, or entire silhouettes that vanish the moment the mist thins. One of the most chilling phenomena at Riverside is the sound of bells. Visitors walking the grounds at night report hearing the sharp clang of ships' bells, ringing clearly through the still air. The sound is unmistakable, echoing as if carried across water, even though no ships are near enough to explain it. Often, the bells are heard in sequences, just as they would be struck to mark time aboard a vessel. Some who have experienced this say it feels like the dead sailors are still keeping watch, maintaining their eternal duty even from beyond the grave. Others believe the bells are a warning, a signal from the spirits to leave the cemetery before something worse is encountered. Not all encounters at Riverside are auditory or visual. Many visitors report sudden drops in temperature as they walk the paths, icy currents of air that seem to appear without warning. These chills are strongest near older sections of the cemetery, where the stones are chipped and the inscriptions faded. Some have claimed to feel unseen hands brush against their arms or shoulders, gentle but insistent, as though the sailors are reaching out from the beyond. In particularly unsettling accounts, visitors have felt a tug at their clothing, like a hand trying to pull them deeper into the mist. Apparitions are most often described in detail by those who have dared to linger in the fog. One recurring story involves a sailor with a lantern, seen wandering near the cemetery's edge. He walks slowly, swinging the lantern in a steady arc, as though searching for something or someone. Witnesses say his face is obscured, hidden either by shadow or by the fog itself. The lantern glows faintly, flickering as if powered by a flame that should have gone out long ago. When approached, the sailor simply dissolves into the mist, leaving behind only the faint glow of the lantern before that vanishes. Paranormal investigators who have studied Riverside Cemetery bring back compelling evidence to support the tales. Audio devices capture the faint clang of bells and the indistinct murmur of voices carried on the wind. Cameras record strange orbs of light, and in some cases, the faint outline of figures moving through the fog. Electromagnetic readings spike unpredictably, often in empty parts of the cemetery. Perhaps most unsettling are the photographs that reveal blurred shapes, faces of men with hollow eyes and grim expressions, emerging just long enough to leave their imprint on film before fading again into the darkness. For the people of Wilmington, Riverside Cemetery has become a place of both fascination and fear. Generations have passed down stories of encounters with the ghostly sailors, and many locals refuse to step foot on the grounds after dark. At the same time, the cemetery draws in thrill-seekers and paranormal enthusiasts, eager to catch a glimpse of the spirits said to wander there. Some leave disappointed, claiming to have experienced nothing more than silence. Others leave shaken, their voices trembling as they recount the sound of bells, the sudden rise of fog, and the hollow-eyed figure of a sailor watching from the shadows. What makes Riverside so unnerving is the sense of history woven into its hauntings. These are not faceless spirits with no past. They are sailors, men whose lives were spent battling storms, braving the seas, and serving aboard ships that now rest at the bottom of the ocean. Their connection to Wilmington runs deep, and it seems their ties have not been severed by death. To walk through Riverside is to feel the weight of that history pressing close, to hear the echo of bells from ships long gone, and to sense the sorrow of men who never truly made it home. By day, Riverside is peaceful, the resting place of countless souls whose graves are tended with care. But by night, when the mist rolls in and the bells toll unseen, it becomes something else entirely. The sailors of Wilmington return in spectral form, their presence marked by shadows, whispers, and the fog that conceals them. Whether they seek comfort, company, or simply a reminder of the lives they once led, no one can say for certain. But those who have heard their bells or seen their forms vanish into the mist never forget the experience. Riverside Cemetery endures as one of the coast's most haunting reminders that some spirits, especially those tied to the sea, are destined to wander forever. Woodlawn Cemetery in Raleigh carries an atmosphere unlike any other place in the city. By day, it is a landscape of solemn stillness, with rows of aging stones, gnarled trees stretching their branches like skeletal arms, and pathways that lead visitors quietly through the history of generations past. But when night falls, the cemetery shifts into something far more unsettling. The air grows heavy, the silence deepens, and those who enter after dark often tell of experiences that defy explanation. For many, Woodlawn is not merely a resting place for the dead, but a crossroads where whispers of the past still echo, and spectral figures walk freely among the shadows. At the heart of its reputation stand two enduring legends: the ghostly horseman who rides through the grounds and the strange flickering lights that dance across the graves. The tale of the spectral horseman has circulated through Raleigh for more than a century. Descriptions vary, but most witnesses agree on the essential details. A dark horse, larger than any ordinary animal, appears suddenly out of the shadows. Upon its back rides a figure clad in outdated clothing, often described as a soldier or perhaps a man of rank from another era. His features are rarely visible, his face obscured by darkness or hidden beneath a broad hat. Some claim the horseman is headless, his shoulders empty where a face should be, while others insist his eyes glow faintly in the night. He moves silently, the hooves of the horse making no sound on the ground, and within moments of being seen, both horse and rider vanish into the gloom as if they were never there. Legend suggests the horseman may be tied to one of Raleigh's early wars, perhaps a Confederate soldier who perished nearby and whose spirit cannot rest. Others believe he is a figure from even earlier times, a messenger or rider from the colonial period, doomed to forever repeat his lonely patrol. Whatever his origin, the sightings are consistent enough that even skeptics hesitate to dismiss them outright. Those who have seen him firsthand often describe an overwhelming sense of dread in his presence, as if the weight of history itself were bearing down upon them. Equally famous are the eerie lights that appear in Woodlawn Cemetery. They come without warnings, flickers at first, like candle flames floating above the graves, then brighter glows that drift through the trees or dart quickly across the paths. Some are white, others bluish or green, and they move with purpose, as if guided by unseen hands. Paranormal investigators who have studied the lights describe them as orbs of energy, possibly manifestations of restless spirits. Skeptics argue they could be swamp gas or tricks of the eye, but those who have followed the lights insist they lead them deeper into the cemetery before suddenly vanishing, leaving the follower disoriented and unnerved. Adding to the cemetery's mysteries are the whispers that many visitors report. On still nights, when no wind stirs the trees and the cemetery is empty, faint voices drift through the air. The words are often indistinct, as though scraps of long-ago conversations are playing out again. Some hear laughter, others weeping, and a few claim to have recognized full sentences, always spoken in accents or tones that feel out of place in the present. It is as if Woodlawn holds the echoes of its past residents, fragments of their lives lingering in the air long after their bodies were laid to rest. Shadowy figures also make frequent appearances in the cemetery. Visitors describe glimpsing people in period clothing wandering among the stones, only to realize the figures vanish when approached. Men in tattered uniforms, women in long dresses, and even children holding hands have been spotted moving silently between graves. These apparitions never interact with the living, instead carrying out some silent task or simply drifting through the cemetery as though unaware of their audience. Paranormal investigators suggest these may be residual haunting spirits, caught in loops of their past lives, replaying their final moments over and over. One particularly chilling account involves a visitor who claimed to see a group of men gathered beneath a large tree, engaged in what seemed like quiet conversation. As he approached, hoping to confirm what he saw, the figures faded into the air, leaving behind only the faint murmur of voices that died away into silence. Others tell of hearing footsteps following them, only to turn and find themselves alone. The combination of whispers, footsteps, and fleeting figures makes Woodlawn feel alive in ways that unsettle even the most skeptical of guests. Paranormal teams who have investigated the grounds often come away with evidence that supports these stories. Recordings capture whispers where no one was present, and electromagnetic detectors spike in random, unexplained bursts. Cameras pick up streaks of light and shadowy forms that resemble people, but cannot be explained by natural causes. Thermal imaging has even revealed human-shaped heat signatures standing near headstones, when the cemetery was otherwise empty. These findings have only deepened Woodlawn's reputation as one of Raleigh's most haunted sites. Despite its dark reputation, there are those who believe the spirits of Woodlawn are not malicious, but simply bound by memory. The spectral horsemen may be endlessly replaying a duty from long ago. The whispers might be echoes of families visiting their dead, conversations never meant to vanish. The strange lights could be nothing more than attempts of the departed to make their presence known, glowing reminders that their stories are not forgotten. Still, the experience of being in the cemetery at night is far from comforting. The weight of unseen eyes, the sudden chill of cold air pressing against the skin, and the certainty of voices rising from nowhere combine to create an atmosphere of profound unease. Even those who go in search of adventure often leave shaken, their laughter silenced by the things they cannot explain. By daylight, Woodlawn Cemetery is calm, its paths traveled by families paying respects and caretakers maintaining its grounds. But when night descends, it becomes something entirely different, a place where history refuses to remain buried, where the spectral horseman rides silently, where lights float between graves like will-o'-the-wisps, and where whispers of the past drift through the trees. To walk there after dark is to step into a realm where time bends, where the dead and the living share the same ground, and where every shadow holds the possibility of a spirit waiting to be seen. Oak Hill Cemetery in High Point is a place where history and mystery intertwine among weathered stones and winding paths. By day, it appears peaceful, a resting ground for generations of local residents, with old trees shading graves that date back over a century. The quiet is punctuated by the occasional bird song or the rustle of leaves in the breeze, giving the impression of calm and reflection. But, as night falls, Oak Hill takes on a different character. Visitors who walk its paths after dark often report strange phenomena: unexplained lights, shadowy figures, and a heavy presence that presses on the senses. For those who venture there at night, the cemetery is anything but empty. Many of Oak Hill's ghost stories involve apparitions of former residents. Witnesses describe seeing figures dressed in period clothing, wandering among the graves as though carrying out routines from their lives long past. Some appear to be men in suits, their posture rigid and purposeful, while others resemble women in long dresses, their heads bowed in silent sorrow. These apparitions often vanish when approached, leaving no trace other than the memory of a figure glimpsed just at the edge of perception. Locals say the spirits are the echoes of those who lived in High Point generations ago, lingering because of unfinished business or attachment to the place they once called home. Unexplained lights are another frequent phenomenon at Oak Hill. Visitors have reported seeing faint glows hovering above graves or floating between the trees. The lights vary in color, sometimes appearing as soft white orbs, at other times flickering blue or green. Paranormal investigators who have studied the cemetery claim that the lights move with intention, weaving around headstones and along paths in ways that defy explanation. Some witnesses describe the lights leading them deeper into the cemetery, only to disappear when they attempt to follow. These eerie illuminations have fueled speculation that the spirits of Oak Hill are attempting to communicate or mark particular locations of significance. The atmosphere of the cemetery at night contributes greatly to its reputation. Many who enter Oak Hill after dusk describe a feeling of heaviness, as if the air itself is laden with unseen weight. This presence can feel suffocating, a constant pressure on the chest that intensifies as one moves deeper into the older sections of the cemetery. Some visitors report that the sensation comes in waves, coinciding with glimpses of movement or sudden flashes of light. Those unfamiliar with the area may dismiss it as imagination. Yet longtime locals insist it is real, a hallmark of Oak Hill's haunted nature. Some of the most chilling experiences reported at Oak Hill involve auditory phenomena. Faint footsteps are often heard on gravel paths, yet when visitors turn to see who is walking, no one is there. Other reports include soft whispers, indistinct conversations that seem to drift from one grave to another, and occasional low murmurs that vanish when approached. These sounds often accompany sightings of apparitions or lights, creating the impression that the spirits are both present and aware of the living visitors. Stories passed down through the community include encounters with specific figures at Oak Hill. One frequently told tale involves a man in a long coat seen pacing near an old family plot. Witnesses claim that he stops abruptly when noticed, as if acknowledging the living, then slowly fades into the darkness. Another account describes a young woman in a white dress who appears near the center of the cemetery on moonlit nights. Her movements delicate and purposeful, vanishing before she can be reached. Such stories give the cemetery a rich tapestry of hauntings, each tale adding to the sense that the past is never truly gone. Paranormal investigators who have visited Oak Hill often return with recordings, photographs, and other evidence suggesting the cemetery is far from ordinary. Cameras sometimes capture blurry shapes among the headstones, faint orbs of light, or shadows that appear human in form. Audio devices pick up whispers, footsteps, and other noises that cannot be attributed to wind or wildlife. Electromagnetic readings frequently spike in specific areas, particularly around older graves, indicating unusual energy activity. While skeptics suggest natural explanations for some of these occurrences, the volume and consistency of reports make Oak Hill one of High Point's most talked about haunted locations. Visitors have also reported sensations of touch at Oak Hill. Some feel a brush against their arm or shoulder when no one is nearby, while others describe the fleeting pressure of an unseen hand resting momentarily on their back. These encounters, subtle yet deeply unsettling, often accompany visual or auditory phenomena, reinforcing the impression that the spirits are active and attentive to those who enter the cemetery. Despite the eerie tales, Oak Hill Cemetery remains a site of historical significance. Families continue to visit during the day to pay respects to loved ones, and caretakers maintain the grounds carefully. Yet, after sunset, the cemetery transforms. Shadows lengthen, the air becomes heavier, and the line between the living and the dead seems to blur. Even those who enter with curiosity and courage often leave with a lasting sense of unease, carrying the impression that unseen eyes followed their every step. The combination of ghostly figures, unexplained lights, and the pervasive sense of presence makes Oak Hill unique among North Carolina's historic cemeteries. The legends are not confined to hearsay. Repeated experiences over decades have created a well-established reputation. Some believe the spirits are tethered to the cemetery by memories, regrets, or unfinished business, while others suggest that Oak Hill serves as a crossroads between the living world and the realm of the dead. Whatever the truth, the effect is undeniable. By daylight, Oak Hill appears serene, a cemetery of quiet reflection and respectful remembrance. But at night, the old stones and ancient trees take on a life of their own. Figures move where no one should be, lights drift inexplicably through the darkness, and the air grows heavy with an unseen weight. To step into Oak Hill Cemetery after dark is to enter a world where history lingers in spectral form, where the past reaches out to the present, and where the restless dead continue to walk among the living. Pine Forest Cemetery in Greensboro is a place where the past seems to cling to the present, its grounds steeped in history and mystery. Established in the early 1800s, the cemetery is filled with weathered headstones, wrought iron fences, and tall pines that sway with an almost watchful presence. By day, the cemetery is quiet and solemn, a place where families come to honor their ancestors and walk among the stories of generations past. But as darkness falls, Pine Forest takes on a far more unsettling character. Visitors, after nightfall, frequently report phenomena that defy explanation. Icy drafts that appear from nowhere, figures glimpsed out of the corner of the eye, and whispers that seem to call directly to them. For those who venture there at night, Pine Forest is not merely a resting place for the dead. It is a realm where the spirits of the 1800s may still roam. Many of the hauntings are tied to the spirits of those who lived and died in Greensboro during the 19th century. Locals speak of men and women dressed in clothing from long ago, wandering the cemetery as though carrying out the routines of their lives before death. Some witnesses report seeing men in coats and hats from the period, standing silently by headstones as if guarding them. Others describe women in long, flowing dresses, their faces pale and sorrowful, moving slowly along the paths before vanishing without warning. These apparitions often appear at the edge of vision, fleeting glimpses that vanish when one tries to look directly at them, leaving a lingering sense of unease. Cold drafts are a common experience at Pine Forest Cemetery. Visitors often report walking through warm summer nights only to feel sudden, icy currents of air that chill the skin. These cold spots appear without explanation, frequently near the oldest graves, as though the spirits themselves are reaching out from beyond. Some describe the cold as almost oppressive, pressing on the chest and raising goosebumps along the spine. Paranormal investigators have documented temperature drops of several degrees in these areas, finding no natural source for the phenomenon. For those experiencing it firsthand, the sudden chill is often the first sign that the cemetery's restless spirits are nearby. Whispers are another hallmark of Pine Forest's hauntings. Many visitors claim to hear faint voices calling their names, carried on the wind through the trees and between the headstones. Sometimes the words are indistinct, mere fragments of conversation from another time, while other times they are clear enough to send shivers down the spine. These whispers often come from no discernible source, floating through empty sections of the cemetery, as though the spirits are attempting to communicate directly with the living. Some witnesses insist that the voices echo emotions, sorrow, warning, or longing, tying the living to the unseen past. Mysterious figures are frequently reported as well. Some are fully formed apparitions, while others are shadowy silhouettes that seem to drift along paths or between gravestones. Visitors describe the figures as moving with intention, yet never interacting with the living. Men, women, and even children have been seen wandering through Pine Forest, sometimes in groups, other times alone. One particularly chilling story tells of a young girl in a faded dress standing near a broken headstone, looking directly at a visitor before disappearing into the night. Witnesses often describe a feeling that these spirits are trapped, wandering endlessly without rest, tethered to the cemetery by unfinished business or unresolved grief. Paranormal investigators have long been drawn to Pine Forest Cemetery, and many have documented evidence that supports these accounts. Audio recordings have picked up unexplained whispers, footsteps, and even low murmurs of conversation. Electromagnetic readings frequently spike in the older sections of the cemetery, suggesting unusual energy activity. Those who explore Pine Forest regularly describe a palpable sense of being watched, as though unseen eyes are following their every step. Locals pass down stories of particular spirits as well. One tells of a soldier from the Civil War who can be seen standing near his grave, still in uniform, seemingly keeping watch over the cemetery he never left. Another recounts the tale of a woman who lost her children to disease, wandering the grounds in grief, her cries echoing faintly on the wind. These stories give Pine Forest a narrative beyond simple ghost sightings. They connect the living to the deep history and sorrow embedded in the cemetery itself. Visitors often report feelings that go beyond sight and sound. Some describe sensations of being lightly touched by invisible hands or feeling a gentle tug on clothing, as though the spirits are attempting contact. Others speak of sudden waves of emotion, sadness, fear, or longing without any apparent reason. Combined with the whispers, cold drafts, and fleeting figures, these experiences leave many with a lasting impression that the dead are not at rest, and that Pine Forest Cemetery is a place where the veil between worlds is thin. Despite its chilling reputation, Pine Forest Cemetery remains a historical landmark and a place of reflection. During daylight, families walk among the gravestones, caretakers maintain the grounds, and the weight of history feels tangible but not threatening. Yet as the sun sets, the atmosphere shifts. Shadows grow long and heavy, the air seems to thicken, and the stories of the spirits of the 1800s come alive. Whether one believes these experiences are caused by restless spirits, lingering energy, or the imagination fueled by history, the effect is undeniable. The combination of cold drafts, whispers, and ghostly figures makes Pine Forest Cemetery one of Greensboro's most intriguing and unsettling historic sites. The spirits of the 1800s seem to linger, wandering endlessly through the graves, calling to those who enter, and reminding the living that the past never truly fades. Walking the cemetery at night is to step into a world where time feels suspended, where history and haunting intertwine, and where the restless dead continue to roam among the living. Historic Hillsborough Cemetery in Hillsborough is a site where history and legend intertwine. Its grounds, steeped in the stories of those who lived, fought, and died during the Revolutionary War. By day, it appears serene, a landscape of weathered headstones, shaded paths, and centuries-old trees that stand like silent sentinels. But when night falls, the cemetery transforms. Visitors walking its grounds after dark often report experiences that defy explanation. Ghostly figures emerging from the shadows, footsteps echoing along empty paths, and sudden cold spots that chill the air. For many, historic Hillsborough Cemetery is not simply a resting place for the dead. It is a place where the past refuses to remain buried. Much of the cemetery's haunting is tied to soldiers who fought and died during the Revolutionary War. These men, often young and untested, are said to wander the grounds in spectral form, dressed in period uniforms, their faces pale and solemn. Witnesses describe seeing groups of soldiers moving slowly among the headstones, sometimes standing in formation or appearing to converse in muted tones. Others have reported single figures pacing along the older sections of the cemetery, pausing as though keeping watch over graves long since forgotten. These apparitions often vanish when approached, leaving an eerie emptiness in their place and a lingering sense of history pressing close. Civilians buried in the cemetery are said to haunt it as well. Families who lived in Hillsborough during the Revolutionary era often faced disease, loss, and hardship, and some spirits seem to have remained tethered to the land. Visitors report glimpses of men and women in clothing of the 18th century, moving along the paths as if completing daily routines long past. Some witnesses describe the apparitions pausing to peer at the living, their expressions unreadable, before slowly fading into the shadows. These encounters reinforce the idea that historic Hillsborough Cemetery is a place where both soldiers and civilians continue to linger, bound by the events and emotions of their time. Phantom footsteps are among the most commonly reported phenomena. Visitors walking the gravel and dirt paths often hear the unmistakable sound of boots or shoes crunching against the ground behind them. Yet, when they turn to see who is walking, no one is there. Sometimes the steps echo in a distant section of the cemetery, and other times they seem to follow directly behind, keeping pace with the living. Paranormal investigators who have studied the site note that the footsteps are consistent and persistent, appearing in multiple areas of the cemetery without any natural explanation. For those experiencing them firsthand, the sound is both unnerving and impossible to ignore. Cold spots are another hallmark of the cemetery's haunted reputation. Even on warm nights, visitors often report sudden drops in temperature, icy currents that seem to come from nowhere. These chills frequently occur near older graves or in areas with the highest concentration of historical burials. Some describe the cold as a physical weight pressing against their chest or arms, while others say it is a sudden shiver that raises goosebumps and sends a jolt of fear through the body. Investigators measuring these temperature anomalies have found dramatic drops in localized areas, further fueling the belief that the cemetery is home to restless spirits. Ghostly apparitions at historic Hillsborough Cemetery are sometimes accompanied by faint sounds of the past. Witnesses report hearing murmurs of conversations, faint orders being shouted, or the clinking of objects that seem reminiscent of military activity. Some have even reported hearing the cries of families mourning in the night, echoing as though the cemetery itself is replaying fragments of history. These sounds often coincide with sightings of figures, suggesting a residual energy left by events long ago, playing out silently for anyone who happens to witness it. Paranormal investigators frequently capture evidence that reinforces these tales. Cameras have recorded faint images of figures that resemble soldiers and civilians in period clothing, sometimes partially transparent and positioned near headstones. Audio equipment has captured whispers, muffled voices, and unexplained footsteps. Electromagnetic sensors often spike in the older sections of the cemetery. And thermographic imaging sometimes reveals heat signatures where no living person is present. While skeptics may offer explanations ranging from wind to animals, the sheer volume of consistent reports suggests that something more mysterious may be at work. One particularly chilling account involves a visitor who stayed late to photograph the older sections of the cemetery. As he walked past a cluster of graves, he heard the distinct crunch of boots on gravel behind him. Turning, he saw a line of soldiers in full uniform, standing silently as if frozen in time. When he tried to approach, they simply faded into the shadows, leaving only the echo of their steps and the oppressive cold that lingered long after they were gone. Other accounts include fleeting images of women in period dresses or children playing near old stones, visible for only a moment before disappearing, leaving a haunting impression on anyone who witnessed them. Despite its spectral activity, historic Hillsborough Cemetery remains a historical landmark and a place of remembrance. Families continue to visit during the day to honor their ancestors, and the cemetery is maintained with care. Yet after dusk, the environment changes. The gravestones cast long, dark shadows. The wind through the trees carries an unnatural chill, and the echoes of the Revolutionary era seem to awaken. To walk the cemetery at night is to step into history itself, where soldiers and civilians alike linger, reliving fragments of their lives and deaths. The combination of ghostly apparitions, phantom footsteps, and cold spots makes historic Hillsborough Cemetery one of the most intriguing and haunted sites in North Carolina. Whether the spirits are truly trapped between worlds, or whether the experiences are manifestations of memory and suggestion, the effect on those who visit is undeniable. To enter the cemetery after dark is to feel the presence of the past, to sense the weight of history pressing close, and to encounter echoes of lives that have not entirely moved on. In every shadow, every chill of air, and every faint whisper. The stories of the Revolutionary War and its civilians continue to live on, making historic Hillsborough Cemetery a place where the past is never truly gone. Shiloh Cemetery in Raleigh is a historic burial ground steeped in legend and mystery. By day, it appears peaceful, with rows of weathered headstones, sprawling oaks, and shaded pathways that wind through the grounds. Families still visit to honor their ancestors, leaving flowers and tending graves, maintaining the quiet dignity of the site. But as night falls, Shiloh transforms into a place where the ordinary seems to fade, and the extraordinary becomes palpable. Visitors often report eerie encounters, ghostly figures, cold drafts, whispers, and an unshakable sense that unseen eyes are following them. For many, Shiloh Cemetery is not simply a resting place for the dead, but a threshold where the past continues to reach out. Among the most enduring legends are those of ghostly children. Witnesses describe small figures darting between the headstones, their movements quick and almost playful, yet tinged with a haunting quality. Some report hearing faint laughter carried on the wind, soft at first and then louder, echoing through the cemetery as though the children are running and playing nearby. Others claim to hear the sound of tiny footsteps crunching on gravel paths or rustling leaves, yet when they turn, the space is empty. These apparitions are often seen near older family plots, suggesting that the spirits may be children who passed away long ago, their energy unable to fully leave the grounds they once knew. In addition to children, many visitors report seeing figures in old-fashioned attire, men in period suits, women in long dresses. These apparitions sometimes appear paused in motion, frozen in time, as if caught between the living world and the next. Some witnesses describe feeling that these figures are aware of their presence, turning slightly or glancing toward them before fading into the darkness. Such encounters give the impression that Shiloh Cemetery holds more than memories. It holds lingering souls, replaying fragments of lives once lived. Paranormal investigators are drawn to Shiloh for its consistent reports of activity. Many have recorded EVPs, or electronic voice phenomena, capturing faint whispers, fragmented conversations, and even words addressed directly to those present. In some recordings, voices can be heard calling a visitor's name, despite no one else being in the cemetery. Investigators describe a strong sensation of being observed during these sessions, a feeling that intensifies in areas with the oldest graves, combined with shadows that seem to move independently of natural light sources. The experiences leave both investigators and visitors with an unshakable impression that Shiloh Cemetery is a place of active, lingering spirits. Cold spots are another hallmark of the cemetery's haunted reputation. On clear summer nights, visitors often report sudden drops in temperature, icy drafts that seem to flow through the pathways without origin. These chills frequently occur near clusters of older graves, sometimes accompanied by the sensation of being touched by an unseen hand. While subtle, these experiences are enough to make even seasoned explorers pause, their senses alert to the invisible presence that seems to hover just out of reach. Some describe the cold as oppressive, pressing down on the chest or shoulders, and leaving a lingering awareness long after they leave. Shadowy forms appear frequently in the evening hours, often glimpsed at the edge of vision. Some are fleeting, disappearing when one looks directly at them, while others are more defined figures, standing near headstones, moving slowly, or fading gradually into the darkness, suggesting interaction between spirits or replayed scenes from the past. Combined with the whispers and ghostly figures, these shadows contribute to a sense that Shiloh is alive with unseen energy. Some stories focus on specific encounters. One visitor recalls seeing a small group of children gathered near an old oak, their faces pale and indistinct, playing in silence before vanishing as a cold breeze swept through the cemetery. Another tells of a woman in a long, faded dress, standing near a headstone, her face turned away as if in mourning. When approached, she slowly disappeared, leaving only a faint outline in the dim light. Such encounters give Shiloh an atmosphere of both sadness and mystery, reminding visitors that these spirits may be bound by unfinished business, grief, or lingering attachment to the living world. Paranormal teams who have conducted detailed investigations report a range of unusual phenomena. Cameras often capture orbs of light hovering near graves, and motion-activated devices pick up movement when no person is present. Audio recordings contain whispers, murmurs, and occasional distinct phrases, while electromagnetic readings spike unpredictably in older areas of the cemetery. Many investigators describe a persistent sensation of being watched, sometimes accompanied by a subtle pressure in the air, as though the presence of the departed is tangible. These combined observations reinforce Shiloh's reputation as one of Raleigh's most active and unsettling haunted sites. Despite its eerie reputation, Shiloh Cemetery continues to serve as a place of remembrance and history. Families visit during the day, maintaining the graves and reflecting on the lives of those interred. Yet as evening falls, the environment shifts, shadows deepen, whispers seem to echo from nowhere, and faint lights flicker in ways that cannot be explained. Visitors walking among the headstones may feel the presence of the children, the figures in old attire, and the unseen observers that populate the cemetery at night. The combination of ghostly children, spectral figures, moving shadows, whispers, and cold drafts gives Shiloh Cemetery a hauntingly unique atmosphere. Whether the experiences are the result of restless spirits or heightened imagination, the effect on those who walk its paths after dark is undeniable. To enter Shiloh at night is to feel history and haunting overlap, where the past lingers in every shadow, every faint sound, and every chill in the air. The cemetery becomes a place where the dead are never truly gone, where unseen eyes watch from the darkness, and where the stories of Raleigh's past continue to unfold among the graves. Greenlawn Cemetery in Asheville is a historic site that seems to exist in two very different worlds. By day, it is serene, with rolling hills dotted by weathered headstones, towering trees casting long shadows, and pathways that wind among graves dating back over a century. Families visit to honor their ancestors, and caretakers maintain the grounds, keeping them tidy and peaceful. Yet as the sun sets, Greenlawn Cemetery transforms into a place of mystery and unease. Visitors walking its paths after dark often report strange sights and sounds, ghostly figures that vanish without warning, faint whispers that drift across empty spaces, and lights that appear with no discernible source. It is a place where the veil between the living and the dead seems thin, and the past continues to linger in haunting ways. One of the most common reports from visitors involves ghostly sightings. Many describe seeing figures moving among the headstones, dressed in old-fashioned clothing, as though they belonged to another century. Men in coats and hats, women in long dresses, and children in period attire have all been reported. Often, these figures appear at the edge of vision, fleeting and translucent, vanishing when approached. Witnesses speak of a surreal quality to these encounters, as if the cemetery itself momentarily folds time, allowing them to glimpse residents of the past walking among the graves they once tended in life. Some say the apparitions are simply echoes of the cemetery's history, while others insist the spirits are actively present, aware of the living who enter their space. Mysterious lights are another hallmark of Greenlawn Cemetery. Visitors have reported glowing orbs that float above graves, dot between trees, or hover near old tombstones. The lights vary in color: white, bluish, and sometimes green, and move in ways that defy explanation. Some appear to follow visitors along the paths, disappearing when approached. Paranormal investigators suggest that these lights may be manifestations of the spirits themselves, energy left behind by the deceased, or even attempts at communication. Others speculate that they are residual phenomena, tied to historical events that left a lasting imprint on the land. Regardless of the cause, the lights create an atmosphere of wonder and unease, particularly when combined with the shadowy figures that have also been reported. Whispers are another phenomenon commonly associated with Greenlawn. Visitors often describe hearing faint voices that seem to carry from one grave to another. Sometimes the words are unintelligible, distant echoes of conversations long forgotten, while other times they are distinct enough to make the hair on the back of the neck stand up. A few visitors even claim to hear their own names called softly, despite being alone in the cemetery. These sounds often accompany sightings of apparitions or moving lights, reinforcing the feeling that the cemetery is alive with unseen activity. The whispers give the impression that the spirits are aware of their presence, reaching out through the quiet night air. Photographs taken at Greenlawn have also fueled its reputation. Visitors and paranormal investigators have captured images showing unexplained figures near headstone shapes that resemble human forms, partially transparent and positioned in ways that suggest intention. Orbs of light frequently appear in photographs, sometimes hovering in midair or tracing paths along the ground. In some cases, shadows that appear in images have no source, with no trees or objects nearby to cast them. These photographic anomalies lend credibility to the claims of those who feel they have witnessed something beyond the natural world. Cold spots are another feature that adds to Greenlawn's eerie atmosphere. Even on warm nights, visitors often report sudden drops in temperature, localized chills that seem to flow through specific areas of the cemetery. These cold spots are often strongest near older graves or areas where multiple apparitions have been reported. Some describe the sensation as oppressive, pressing against the body and heightening the feeling that unseen presences are near. Others feel a gentle touch, as if an invisible hand brushes their arm or shoulder. These experiences, subtle yet deeply affecting, leave a lasting impression and contribute to the cemetery's reputation as one of Asheville's most haunted sites. Shadowy figures frequently accompany the lights and whispers. Some appear to move slowly along pathways, while others stand motionless near headstones, seemingly observing those who enter. Many witnesses report the unsettling feeling that these figures are aware of them, turning or tilting slightly as though acknowledging their presence. When approached, the figures vanish, leaving only a lingering sense of being watched. Visitors have described seeing children running among the gravestones, women pausing near old trees, and men standing silently as though guarding the cemetery's secrets. These shadows, combined with the lights and whispers, create an environment where the past feels vividly present. Paranormal investigators who have spent time at Greenlawn often report consistent experiences. Motion sensors detect movement where no living person is present. Audio recorders capture whispers and faint conversations, and cameras capture light anomalies and shadow figures. Electromagnetic readings frequently spike in areas with the oldest graves. Investigators frequently describe a feeling of being followed or watched, even when no one else is in the cemetery. These repeated reports have cemented Greenlawn Cemetery as a location of significant interest for those studying paranormal activity. Despite its reputation, Greenlawn remains a place of reflection during daylight hours. Families continue to visit, history enthusiasts explore the oldest sections, and caretakers maintain the grounds with care. But as night falls, the cemetery changes. Shadows deepen, unexplained lights appear, whispers fill the air, and ghostly figures move silently among the headstones. Visitors walking through Greenlawn at night experience an unsettling combination of history and haunting, where the past refuses to remain silent, and the living are reminded that some presences are never truly gone. The combination of ghostly sightings, mysterious lights, whispers, and photographic anomalies makes Greenlawn Cemetery one of Asheville's most compelling and haunted locations. Whether these experiences are the result of restless spirits, residual energy, or unexplained natural phenomena, the effect on those who visit at night is undeniable. Walking its pathways after dark is to step into a world where the past lingers in every shadow, where unseen eyes watch from the darkness, and where the mysteries of Greenlawn continue to intrigue, haunt, and captivate all who enter its gates. And there you have it, 25 of the most haunted cemeteries in North Carolina. Each graveyard tells a story of tragedy, of restless spirits, and of mysteries that may never be solved. If you feel brave enough, perhaps you'll visit these cemeteries yourself. But remember, respect the dead, and tread carefully, for you may not be alone. The whispers, shadows, and cold chills you feel might be more than your imagination. They might be the lingering souls who call these cemeteries home. Thank you for joining me tonight on this journey through North Carolina's haunted past. If you enjoyed this tale, make sure to subscribe, hit that notification bell, and leave a comment telling us which cemetery chills you the most. Until next time, keep your lights on, and remember, the dead are never truly gone.